financing is available with low monthly payment options. You will likely qualify for tax credits and energy rebates, which could save you up to 30%, adding to the savings you'll enjoy over time with PowerCell. Call now to schedule a free in-home assessment. The call is free, the assessment is free, and there's no obligation to buy. Act now to receive PowerView, Generac's home energy monitoring system, a $300 value. With PowerView, easily keep tabs on your energy consumption, monitor your battery usage, and track your savings. Don't wait. Call or go online now. PowerCell. Savings powered by the sun.
It's earnings season.
The biggest companies in the world are set to report.
And we're breaking down the numbers like nobody else. It's about performance.
And opportunity.
It's earnings season on CNBC.
Good Monday morning. Welcome back to Squawk in the Street. I'm Carl Quintanilla with Sarah Eisen and David Faber at Post 9 of the New York Stock Exchange. Take a look at the markets here. Nice bounce off the open. Futures indicated a drop of 100, but Dow is positive by about 28 points and S&P by 4.
Our roadmap for the hour begins with combating the coronavirus. The death toll now surpassing that of the SARS outbreak, with factories and businesses in China resuming operations.
It's one of the companies getting back to business in China. Tesla shares are spiking as the stock's volatility continues.
Now we got a lot of M&A news to get to this morning, including Xerox, which upped its bid to acquire HP. And we do have that big deal in the mall sector.
But we will begin the morning with the latest on the coronavirus, with the number of confirmed cases in China now well over 40,000, including 910 deaths. That makes this outbreak deadlier than the SARS epidemic back in 2002 and 2003. Our Eunice Yoon has the latest for us out in Beijing. Eunice.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Well, it's deadlier and creating a lot of disruption in the global supply chain. The manufacturers are now dealing with conflicting requirements that vary province to province and city to city. So factories are now being required to put in place several preventive measures. For example, to quarantine workers coming from other areas. Also, some localities are outright delaying their production dates to as late as March 1st. Now, these requirements are creating a lot of confusion. I was speaking to one factory owner in Tianjin who told me that his industrial zone, for example, won't allow him to bring in his own employees because they live in a town that's a couple of miles away. Another factory boss I spoke to in Guangzhou said that he has a shipment of masks sitting in Hong Kong because there have been so many reports that private shipments of masks are being redirected to Wuhan. So he's worried that he won't be able to open because he won't be able to get those masks for his workers. Now, there are some factories that are reopening. I spoke with Ford. Ford said that their plants in Chongqing and Hangzhou have resumed operations, though not at full capacity. Tesla also has opened its Shanghai plant. A local media said that they had spotted staff entering the facilities in a bus wearing masks. Now, the tech names, the big tech names out here are also being very cautious, telling their staffers that they should work from home for at least another week or two. And that gets to the date that a lot of Chinese are looking at, and that is February 20th. A lot of people are hoping that that could be a turning point in the virus spread because it would mark the end of a 14-day incubation period from February 7th, which is when most people started to leave their homes and travel across the country to return to work. Guys?
Hey, Eunice, really quick. There's been what appears to be some disagreement on the level of U.S. help to the Chinese. The Chinese saying maybe the U.S. should offer more. The U.S. appearing to say that we actually have. Are there signs of American assistance, at least in Beijing?
There's definitely signs of American assistance in Wuhan. So a lot of medical supplies have gone there. But you're right. There has been a conflict about that. There's been a lot of tension, actually, about that involving Kyle Bass, for example, as well as the Hu Xijin, who is the Global Times editor. The Global Times editor, Hu Xijin, had been very critical of the U.S., saying that they didn't get enough supplies in. Kyle Bass reacted to that on social media, on Twitter, saying that Hu Xijin was an ingrate. And so that, I think, what we're seeing with Bass is just his reaction to the propaganda machine in China, not only through the government, but also through the state media, where they've been pushing a line that the U.S. is to blame for spreading fear unnecessarily. And, from Kyle Bass's perspective, he's been very upset about that. But then from the Chinese perspective, they didn't look kindly upon some of his comments when he said some things about the Communist Party and his hopes for them. So it's been a very, very tense situation between the two countries in that respect.
Yeah. Well, let's hope some of the modeling that we're getting today that's encouraging actually does come to pass. That's our Eunice Yoon in Beijing. Eunice, thanks. Joining us on the Market Impact today is BMO Capital Markets Chief Investment Strategist Brian Belsky and Morgan Stanley Senior VP of Investments Jim LeCamp. Guys, good to see you both. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Markets obviously looking through this, and you are too, given your year-end targets.
We are, and I would say this. I think we're embroiled in, again, another situation, Carl, where we don't have all the information that we desperately want. We are a society, we are an investment world that wants information immediately. Why is the Dow up? Why is the Dow up 31 points? We need to know now, right? And I think, right, and I think we have to kind of step back and give it some perspective, right? We're talking about a closed society. We're talking about a communist country. We're talking about a news situation where we don't know what is true, what is false, and whatever. And so therefore, what does that mean for markets and investing? Quite frankly, we're sticking with our case that of DDA, dollar-denominated assets. I think that's why the U.S. market is held in there. That's why bonds have held in there. That's why the dollar is held in there. We believe that U.S. investing is the world for stability, is the place for stability. Earnings have become more stable. Bonds have become more stable, and the currency impact. So we think that's how we're going to muddle through this, and that's why, quite frankly, you've heard all these things about the market being resilient and everything like that. We believe it's because most investors heading into 2020 have been massively underweight U.S. stocks, and that's why you saw the January bounce, and that's why I think stocks have held in there today.
So there's also this idea out there that we're going to see a V-shaped recovery in China. Whenever they are able to contain this, then all of the activity that has been lost will come back. And Mohamed Al-Arian of Allianz wrote over the weekend that may not be the case. I mean, a goods recovery is different than, say, a financial crisis kind of recovery where you can just come right back. Is the market getting too excited here or understating the economic loss that we're looking at in China?
I think that's an excellent point, Sarah, and I think so many people have been waiting and praying for this recovery in emerging markets and really banking on that. We think it's just a little bit too soon, especially given the fact we're not talking about how much supply chains have changed the last several months with the tariffs and things like that. You add all that up, and I think there continues to be a lot of fundamental volatility in China that the proof is in the pudding. They need to put up numbers not only from a 1 or 2 quarter basis, but a several quarter basis before people actually start feeling like we're starting to see a bottom there.
So your view is not that we're going to see a recovery from all of this by stocks. Your view is that the U.S. is the global safe haven.
We think the U.S. is not only a global safe haven, but from a fundamental perspective, the strongest asset in the world, period. And we do think, especially given the fact that many people got 2019 wrong and timed it wrong, we saw the rush back into the U.S. in January, and we still think we have the best companies in the world, period. And we're heading back into that mid-90s type frame where large cap quality runs, and it just so happens to be many technology stocks, many communication services stocks, and consumer discretionary, and clearly financials are the place to be in terms of stability and using that large cap stable type of framework.
Jim, when could we get to the part of the story where you start to bet on EM and heavy cyclicals? Has that been pushed out? Because it seems like we were starting to get there, and then this virus came along.
And to your point, Carl, but what we saw in the fourth quarter of this year, where we saw all these ISM readings around the world, not only in the U.S., but around the world, start to show stabilization, if not growth. Secondly, what we've seen is central bankers around the world still be very accommodative, and I think that's a very important thing to note. Now, the U.S. market is responding pretty well here. You look at the news flow over the weekend, and you start to think, oh my gosh, we're going to have a lower opening on Monday. But the best way to ride a horse is to go the same direction that the horse is going. And the trends in the U.S. are still very positive. Now, all of that being said, Carl, I think we need to be a little cautious here and tap the brakes a little bit. If we look at the history of U.S. presidential election years, that time frame between February and, say, late summer is usually pretty volatile. I think investors need to be aware of that despite all the whack-a-mole news that we're getting about the coronavirus, that we're still entering a time frame of the year seasonally when the stock market runs into more volatility. We're just off of all-time highs. So I think we need to be very careful and very patient here. We didn't have much of a correction. We had all this bad news. We didn't even have a 10% correction. 10% corrections are pretty normal. But that being said, I think we have a friendly Fed. I think the backdrop is okay. I just think we need to be a little bit careful about getting too excited right now. And we still don't know what we don't know about the coronavirus.
Yeah, it's a good point Jim raises, Brian. Implied volatility of U.S. equities exceeds that now of European equities by the most since August. What's that telling us?
Well, it's because you've seen in the last 2 or 3 months, quite frankly, you've seen these massive moves to the upside, certainly, but then when the market reacts to negative news, it reacts very violently, and I think that's why you're starting to see that volatility. But Jim's exactly right with respect to historically in terms of the election side of things. But one thing to point in mind is that a lot of the primaries have been moved up this year. So I don't know if we're going to head that into that traditional seasonality into the summer. I think the near term, meaning March, April, could be a lot more volatility, number one. Number two, with respect to what's happening with the election as well, I think many people are giving it way too much credit. The economy is where it's at. People vote their pocketbook in the United States. And we saw in 2016, clearly, there was additional volatility in terms of Brexit and things like that people forget. So I think, too, especially given the fact that the S&P was up 31% last year, we're going to have to slow down a little bit at some point. We still think we're in a 20-year bull market. Investors should be fully invested with respect to equities.
What year are we in the 20 years?
20? We're 10 years in, and so I think we have 10 more. We're sticking with our call. We think we have a 20 to 25-year bull market. We made the call in 2010. We still think that we're there.
Finally, Jim, to what degree are equities still a potential victim to a spike in yield? Where do you see the 10-year at the end of the year?
Well, the 10-year yield doesn't appear to be going anywhere north, and the Federal Reserve Board seems to be very intent on keeping rates where they are. Now, we did see some commodity price increases in the fourth quarter. Naturally, they've given way as the coronavirus news came out. If you saw a spike in commodity prices, then maybe they could push those yields up. The Fed really seems to want to be accommodative here, and that's why you have to be somewhat constructive. But it's not only our central bank. It's very likely that you're going to get fiscal stimulus out of England post-Brexit. And it's very likely, as a result of that, you'll get fiscal stimulus out of Germany. That could put a bid below global equities as well this year. I just think we have to be very careful. And the other thing I want to point out here, Carl, is we've started to see some signs, early signs, of possible rotation. The semiconductor index late last week, you saw a lot of good names being trashed on up days in the market. So the market may be saying, hey, maybe it is time to rotate a little bit here. I think you got to wait till you really see the whites of the eyes there, but I think that's something else investors are going to have to watch for here.
You're right. It did raise some eyebrows last week. Brian, Jim, thanks, guys. Good stuff. By the way, a reminder, do not miss a special report on the coronavirus outbreak tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's right here on CNBC.
Let's get to some deals this morning. The big one that's gotten a lot of people's attention, of course, is Simon Property Group's decision to buy Taubman, or 80% of in fact, Taubman. Shareholders there are going to receive $52.50 a share in cash for a sector that a lot of people have thought is dead, or at least mostly dead. This is certainly a sign of life. Now, if you take a look at 5-year charts of the likes of Simon or Taubman or Macerich, another company that Simon tried to buy a number of years ago, you will see, and sort of put in perspective, some of the values that have been accorded this sector. Is, of course, as we know, the mall has lost momentum, I think, to say the least, not to mention a lot of tenants. Now, these are top-line malls, sort of A-plus kind of malls with very significant, with very high-end tenants. Taubman thinks Short Hills, for example, in New Jersey, and lots of other 24 actually assets, both here in the United States and around the world. The Taubman family, as I said, going to continue to. It's going to be managed separately. They're not combining it with Simon. Taubman Center is still 20% going to be owned by the Taubman family, who will have the right to sell to Simon. Simon will have a call on their ownership over the next few years as well. But the key thing here is this 53%, 52% premium over what was already an affected stock price, given there were some reports last week that the two might be in talks. And so it is a significant reminder, Sarah, that there is still some life in the mall, at least in the opinion of Simon. And interesting to see slightly positive response from Simon Sherwood.
And not all malls are equal. I mean, some of them have really become much more fun and high-end destinations. And I think that the quote says it all. It'll allow them to invest in innovative retail environments for retailers and consumers. To me, that means we're going to see more restaurants and more entertainment and more, I don't know, rides and experiences versus the traditional retail, which has been pulling out. It's also interesting that this came off of another deal that they recently did for Forever 21.
Yeah,
the bankrupt company.
They've been working on the Forever 21
so they're
deal.
salvaging.
It was somewhat, as you could see, even in the market, certainly unexpected at a price like this. Again, though, the market caps are nowhere near what they were a number of years ago. Pointed out Macerich up over 8%, but take a look at 5 years on that stock. It has been nothing but down for so much of this sector. Speaking of another sector where there has been a difficulty in finding any growth, of course, we've talked a lot about Hewlett-Packard, HP Inc., and Xerox. This morning, Xerox does increase its bid to acquire HP Inc. to $24 a share, comprising both cash and stock. The new bid is $18.40 a share in cash and 0.149 Xerox shares. Remember, it had been $17 in cash, $5 worth of stock previously. And they're saying a 41% premium now to HP's unaffected price. They have been doing everything we said they would, and in at least the view of Xerox, checking all of the boxes that perhaps a number of shareholders and certainly the management and the board at HP seem to be saying would not meet their criteria in terms of locking up financing, in terms of now moving to a higher price. And of course, a tender offer goes along with that as well. None of it, though, has been enough, at least at this point, to bring HP to the table. Remember, we have said that this might go as long as the spring and actually go to the vote of shareholders. They are challenging, of course, for all 11 of the seats on the board of directors. That another data point, of course, along the way, or another thing that they have hit along the way. So you do have the full proxy fight. You do have the tender offer. You now have the higher price. What you don't have is any conversations as yet between these two companies. Interesting to note a move up in Xerox shares, at least here. Where they end up, of course, is the question. If they ever do end up at the negotiating table, people close to Xerox have told me they're willing to put aside all questions about what we call social issues. That is, even who's going to lead the combined company, although it does seem very much apparent, at least based on everything I've heard, that they would expect John Byzantine, the CEO of Xerox, to try to deliver on that $2 billion plus in synergies they've talked about, and board composition. But so far, there has been no willingness on HP. They simply don't feel like their shareholder base is pushing them to do it. We'll see if that changes with this higher offer. Sarah?
Still to come on the show, exclusive data on Tesla will reveal the big advantage the company holds over other automakers. And later, it is the biggest innovation expansion for snack bar maker Kind. The founder will join us at Post 9 later this hour to discuss. Big show still ahead. Don't go away. Dow's up 61.
Imagine traveling hassle-free with your golf clubs. Now you can with ShipSticks.com. No more lugging your clubs through the airport at risk having your clubs lost or damaged by the airlines. Sending your own clubs ahead with ShipSticks.com makes it fast and easy to get to your golf destination. With just a few clicks or a phone call, we'll pick up and deliver your clubs on time, guaranteed, for as low as $39.99. ShipSticks.com saves you time and money. Make it simple. Make it ShipSticks.
If you've tried college but never finished, SNHU lets you transfer up to 90 credits toward your bachelor's degree.
It doesn't matter how old you are, you can do it. You can finish.
Finish your degree at snhu.edu.
Alexa, tell me about Neptune's Sorrow.
It's a masterstroke of heartache
and redemption.
The Lexus NX, modern utility for modern obstacles.
Lease the 2020 NX 300 for $359 a month for 36 months.
Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
There's always going to be this human hunger for communal activity. People aren't going to chain themselves to the couch. They're going to want to see things in a way they can't see them at home. The explosion of content means it's harder to stand out. We have new generations of lenses and cameras. We're looking at alternative content, concerts or sports. We've proven that for all the divides, there are forms of entertainment that can unite the world. This is the future of business. I watch CNBC.
WW Weight Watchers Reimagined have a new customized weight loss program, MyWW, where no foods are off limit. Just fill out a simple assessment and get matched to a plan that suits you. You love eating carbs, cooking at home, or eating out? No problem with this new customized plan. Discover which new MyWW plan can make losing weight easier for you. Join now and get 50% off your first 3 months. Offer ends 8th of February. Subscription fees and conditions apply. Mainland UK only. See website for details.
Dear Cass, sweet pea, not sure what I did to deserve a love like yours. I'm so lucky. You make me want to be a better man. Mind, body, and soul.
Pork balls, fried rice, kung pao chicken, spring rolls extra fried, order 55.
Yeah, here. Happy Valentine's, my love, forever, your little boop. This Valentine's Day, heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Get £10 off when you send someone special 24 roses. Download the app today. Exclusions apply.
Getting some breaking news from the Department of Justice this morning. For that, we'll go to Eamon Javers in D.C. Morning, Eamon.
Yeah, good morning, Carl. Attorney General William Barr holding a press conference right now over at the Department of Justice in which he's announcing the indictment now of 4 members of the Chinese People's Liberation Army for hacking in to the computer systems of Equifax, the credit rating agency. The Attorney General is saying here that these members of the Chinese military have been indicted here in this hack, which happened several years ago. It impacted, he says, about 145 million Americans in terms of their sensitive personal data. The Attorney General here making a point that Chinese intelligence can use that data for not only economic espionage in terms of getting the data behind how Equifax captures information itself on U.S. consumers and citizens, but also
Well, I think Apple and Foxconn have both been sort of talking about moving beyond China. There are lower cost regions in terms of cost of production. China's getting relatively more expensive, and I think Apple's lack of diversification in terms of where it makes the iPhone is really biting them here, and it's a reminder that they need to diversify geographically, perhaps, in terms of where they make the iPhone.
So what has Apple said? What have they said publicly about the financial impact here? Again, they get, I don't know, up to 20% of their sales are in China. They make most of their stuff in China that they sell around the world. This seems to me like it could be more than a one-quarter thing, because it's going to take a while for these factories to get ramped up again and build inventory and distribute it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's my concern, Paul, is I think this illness now is going global. So in terms of the impact in China, I think it's sort of confined to, let's say, the next month or so. But more broadly speaking, for Apple, there's a concern that people aren't going out to the retail stores as much. So I think there'll be, my opinion is, we'll see an impact in the second quarter. But if it continues to spread globally, I think it potentially could spill out over into third quarter. And I need to say one thing. The company continues to say that they factored this impact into their latest guidance. So coronavirus was already an issue when they set the guidance for the current quarter, but it has since gotten worse. So.
One thing that this situation has really highlighted for me is just how much of an engine China is in terms of production of electronic parts. I mean, it's just such a massive source of all of these products. Can you give us any kinds of sizes, scopes, any kind of understanding of just how crucial not only China, but in particular Wuhan, which is the hardest hit area, is for these types of products?
It's hard to say, Lisa. You know, the global supply chain is so huge and it's so diverse, and it's been diversifying geographically. But I think you hit the nail on the head. China is still the world's factory floor. So for Apple, even beyond Hanhai, there are other manufacturers for them in China that are being impacted by coronavirus. In terms of pegging an actual number on to what percent of total global electronic manufacturing is in China, it's anyone's guess. I'll throw out 70% as a guesstimate, but I
70%.
I actually have no idea. I've never really run the numbers. So
John, one of the things for Apple, the bull case is 5G. Is there any risk to this manufacturing supply chain issue impacting what could be this 5G story building for Apple?
Not yet, Paul. You know, they typically need a couple of months of lead time in terms of building the new devices. That would put us in July in terms of the start of production, maybe even mid-June, conservatively. And I think, at least in China, we're going to be clear of this crisis by then. The real issue is Apple is reportedly going to launch the iPhone 9, a low-cost sequel to the iPhone SE, if you remember that one. Priced at $399, and that was going to have a March launch date, according to Bloomberg. And so we'll see what happens there. I have a feeling that's almost certainly going to get pushed out by this epidemic.
You know, I could just keep speaking with you. And one thing that you said that when you walked in that really was compelling to me, John, was about the factory floor, the Foxconn factory floor, and how they have to increase the ventilation and make it safer for people to come back, and what that will take in order to get the sign off. And there are all these questions.
There are a lot of little things you don't think about. So when you're manufacturing the iPhone, you need really superior ventilation to limit dust, the risk of dust getting into the devices. But that kind of system promotes the spread of a virus. And so somehow they're going to have to work out a solution to that. And that, I think, is one of many small items that we don't always think about.
John Butler, thank you so much. Always illuminating. John Butler, Senior Telecom Services and Equipment Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us here in our Interactive Broker Studios, looking right now at Apple. Shares down just a touch here, 0.6%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks have been fluctuating and now have turned higher. Once again, investors struggling to gauge the economic hit from the spreading coronavirus. But it is a busy week ahead for Wall Street. The key event to watch, Fed Chair Jay Powell will deliver his semi-annual monetary policy report to Congress. We may get clues on how policy will be impacted by the outbreak. Plus, the earnings train keeps rolling along with the giants such as PepsiCo, Molson Coors, Cisco Systems, and Kraft Heinz. The parent company of Mercedes-Benz reportedly will announce as many as 15,000 job cuts tomorrow. That's according to a German newspaper. Daimler has already said it would eliminate 10,000 jobs. Margins have been squeezed by high manufacturing costs. And Birds of Prey broke the 3-week winning streak of Bad Boys for Life and topped the box office, but sales still fell short of estimates. The film earned $33.3 million in its first wide release, according to ComScore. Courtney Dunhope, Bloomberg Radio.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Get prepped for your paint job at TradePoint. Right now with a huge 3 for 2 on coloured emulsion. And if you have loyalty discount, you'll get this on top. Don't miss 3 for 2 on coloured emulsion at TradePoint. Excludes white paint and ready-mix trade paint. Every third item per single transaction is descending price order free. Ends 24th of February. See tradepoint.co.uk.
This is the Survivalist Network. It's been 1 day since the zombies appeared. I haven't slept since Saturday. My zombie neighbour just tried to bite my arm off. Luckily, he couldn't get his infected fingers past the high tensile steel of my Toyota Hilux Invincible. That £199 per month with 0% APR representative is feeling like excellent value now. Get to a Toyota Hilux Invincible. You'll be fine.
0% APR representative on new sales of Hilux Invincible over 42 months. £199 per month. Customer deposit of £10,246 when financed through Access Toyota by 31st March 2020. £12,525 optional final payment. Subject status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, oil remains under pressure. We have WTI crude under $50 a barrel. We'll see if OPEC can do anything about it. Plus, we're going to discuss the impact of Trump's retaliation on national security, including the global entry ban on New York. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, what do you have?
Paul, stocks are edging just a bit higher, while European and Asian stocks slipped in their trading sessions. Investors are struggling to gauge the economic hit from the spreading coronavirus while preparing for more corporate earnings. Treasuries and European bonds turned higher, and the dollar's little changed versus a basket of its major peers. Eric Robertson, a Standard Chartered, tells Bloomberg he does not see a rapid or V-shaped recovery for the Chinese economy after the coronavirus shock subsides.
Our baseline view coming into the year, even before this health crisis emerged, was that global growth was stable, but at a low level. And at low levels of growth, you don't have the resilience in the event of an exogenous shock. Well, we've just had that. You will see incredible stimulus out of China, and you will see stimulus from the rest of the world. But our view is that the growth recovery in the second half of the year is going to be very underwhelming.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 0.3%, up 11. The Dow's up 0.3%, up 92, and the Nasdaq's up 0.5%, up 46. The 10-year is up 5/30 seconds. The yield is 1.56%. West Texas Intermediate crude is now down almost 1% at 49.84 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.2% at 15.7670 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.72. The euro is $1.936, and the British pound $1.2939. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
If there is any area of markets today that we would like to get opinion on, it is for sure the oil market, because this has been a source of ongoing question. Can OPEC Plus step in and stave off some of the weakness, at least that we're seeing in demand from China, the spreading coronavirus? Julian Lee, oil strategist for Bloomberg News and a Bloomberg Opinion columnist, joining us now from London. So happy to have you, Julian. We're looking right now. Crude traded on the NYMEX down about 1%, heading back towards session lows, and this comes on the heels of OPEC Plus basically saying, we don't have Russia support to go ahead and make further output cuts. Is OPEC Plus basically irrelevant to deal with the modern era of fast-moving supply-demand dynamics and a U.S. that is producing more and more oil?
Well, I think one has to look at, really what led to the creation of OPEC Plus, and this was the fact that back in 2016, the oil producers were facing the first US shale boom, and we saw a collapse in prices, and they didn't want to try and deal with that on their own, so they gathered together a group of non-OPEC countries, Russia among them, to make the bigger output cuts that were needed and to share some of the burden. That relationship has lasted longer, perhaps, than anybody intended initially. And we now have a situation where they're trying, I think, to deal with a very different situation. The U.S. shale boom was a long drawn out process. You could see what was happening. There were some pretty good forecasts of where production would go. What they're dealing with now is a very sudden and very severe demand shock in the opposite direction, demand going down. Nobody knows how long it's going to last. Nobody knows how deep that drop is going to be. And what they need right now, I think, is agility. And they need to be able to agree cuts quickly and implement them and reverse them. And that seems to be what they can't do at the moment.
And Julian, I thought they were talking about, I know there's a regularly scheduled OPEC meeting in March, and they were talking about bringing it forward to sometime in February to try to get ahead of this issue, but they've not even been able to do that, have they?
No, they haven't. A week or so ago, there was talk of bringing that meeting forward, perhaps even to the weekend just gone. And that really hasn't materialized. They're running out of time now to bring it forward, any distance that makes any sense. There's no point in bringing it forward a week or even 2 weeks. That doesn't allow them to get ahead of the nominations for how much people want to lift for April, which is what they would be looking at if they started meeting sort of towards the end of February. What they need to be able to do is they need to be able to cut supplies right now. They need a mechanism where, arguably a smaller group of the big producers who can actually make significant cuts because their production is big enough will get together and agree something very quick. If you look at the non-OPEC part of OPEC Plus, it's 10 countries. 7 of those countries in the last round of cuts collectively agreed to reduce their output by 26,000 barrels a day. That's nothing. That's within the margin of error of measurement. So arguably, yes, those 7 countries help to bulk up OPEC or OPEC Plus in the sense of the number of members, but they add very, very little in terms of what they actually contribute to output cuts.
Julian, what happens if OPEC goes away?
I think we need some group of producers that will act as a, if you like, a central bank of oil, as it's been called, or who will respond flexibly.
Well, hold on one second. Not to interrupt you, though.
At the moment is too big.
But take out some sort of, I don't want to say cartel, but cartel that is trying to regulate the pricing, and what happens to the price of oil?
Oh, I absolutely agree that we need something. The price of oil, if you don't have a core of OPEC that will respond and will keep a certain amount of capacity in reserve and will bring that online when it's needed or shut it in when it's not, we would have a much more volatile oil price. What I've said in the column is that a lot of these smaller members, perhaps both of OPEC and certainly the non-OPEC group, who are either simply offering up natural decline in their oil production as output cuts, who are contributing tiny amounts in terms of cuts, who can't boost their output if they needed to because they're pumping at capacity. They serve no real purpose in terms of balancing supply and demand. All they are really doing is making the process of reaching agreement more complicated because you have to get more parties on board.
Hey, Julian Lee, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Julian Lee, oil strategist for Bloomberg News, joining us on the phone from London. You can read Julian's work and all the other great folks at Bloomberg Opinion who put out great stuff every day, really thought-provoking, at Bloomberg.com/opinion, and those on the terminal, OPIN, go for Bloomberg Opinion. Interesting here, it's a clearly, what we've noticed really over the last year plus is a demand issue really kind of moving oil markets around, and whether it's trade uncertainty or whether it's the coronavirus, demand kind of really ruling the day here as it relates to oil trading globally. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Paul, Democrats are crisscrossing New Hampshire on this final day of presidential campaigning before the first-in-the-nation primary. Now, most tracking polls put Bernie Sanders ahead of Pete Buttigieg in the Granite State. Amy Klobuchar rising to third place after her debate performance on Friday night. As for Joe Biden, the former vice president tells CBS this morning,
"We're just getting going. You got to get 1,900 delegates or more. And this is just getting started. And I've said that from the very, very beginning."
Biden is counting on a strong showing in Nevada and South Carolina later this month to bolster the argument he is the candidate best positioned to take on President Trump in the fall. The White House has sent a $4.8 trillion budget request to Congress. It includes billions more for the military and a mission to Mars, and a 5% cut to non-defense spending, including $700 billion less for Medicaid over a decade. White House counselor Kellyanne Conway.
Medicaid is meant to be health care, health insurance, if you will, for the poor and for those who are disabled, not other people who are either gaming the system, and that's what it is.
The budget assumes economic growth above 3% this year. The median estimate among economists surveyed by Bloomberg is 1.8%. The Justice Department's announced charges against 4 Chinese military members accused of hacking into Equifax in 2017. Attorney General William Barr.
The hackers broke into Equifax's network through a vulnerability in the company's dispute resolution system.
The Federal Trade Commission says more than 140 million people may have had their personal data exposed. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rate may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
The UK has now left the EU, and we're in a transition period until the end of the year. Throughout this period, the government will be forging new partnerships with the EU and the rest of the world. This could lead to new arrangements for trade, travel, and business. To find out about the changes and how they might affect you, go to gov.uk/transition.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway. We're with you.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
The comedian Louis C.K. is on tour now for the first time since his sexual misconduct against other comedians was brought to light. This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with critic Hilton Alls about how Louis C.K. is addressing the issue in his act or not addressing it. And more broadly, we'll talk about when and how a disgraced performer should come back before the public. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Shaw is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Well, you can't seem to keep them down, stocks that is, at least not right now. Despite coronavirus concerns, the NASDAQ beat its intraday record and the S&P is close. We check those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. Let's go ahead and start with the S&P 500, currently up 0.4%, up 13. The Dow's up 0.4%, up 107, and the Nasdaq's up 0.6%, up 53. The 10-year is up 6/32. The yield is 1.56%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.8% at 49.90 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.25% at 15.7720 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.73. The euro's $1.0929, and the British pound $1.2940. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, as Greg Jarrett said, you just can't keep a good market down. We have the Dow up 100. It's up 112 points, and it's kind of shrugging off the coronavirus, it appears. To help us get a sense of what is going on out there, Scott Clemens, Chief Investment Strategist for Brown Brothers Harriman, based in Pittsburgh, and actually in here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. You're based in New York, though, right?
New York, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, thanks for being on our studio. Again, Lisa and I, earlier in the morning, we were looking at commodities, and commodities are all down. The metals are down, and kind of reflecting, presumably, uncertain global GDP growth exacerbated by the concerns of the coronavirus. No such issue, really, with the equity markets. What do you make of that?
At the risk of dating myself, I've referred to this as the Timex market. You remember those old commercials that takes a licking and keeps on ticking? Think about what this market has been confronted by just in the past couple of months, between escalation of tensions in the Middle East around year end, of course, the presidential impeachment and trial, and now the coronavirus. I think that investors are looking through all of this noise to the underlying fundamental driver, that is personal consumption. 68% of GDP is personal spending. As long as the labor market is healthy, as long as the housing market is healthy, that engine of economic activity and therefore earnings and therefore the market is okay.
I thought you were going to say they're all looking at the underlying driver, which is the Federal Reserve.
Helps, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, but how much is that? Yes. That sort of what's driving this?
Well, it's meaningful. I think of that as an insurance policy of sorts. Not only the Fed's willingness to lower interest rates last year and send the signal that they intend to keep them so this year, but the balance sheet operations as well. So you've got a fundamental backdrop of a decent economic environment, not great, but durable, stable economic environment, with the insurance policy of easy monetary policy. That's a pretty powerful combination.
All right. So again, we had such a great 2019, and even with some headwinds, 2020 is a pretty solid start as well. What sectors should we be looking at here, given that we're 11 years or so into this economic cycle? Is it defensive? Do I go back out on the risk curve? What am I do on the equity side?
We like those equity sectors and plays that depend on this underlying fundamental strength in the consumer. So consumer discretionary, consumer staples, they're sort of old-fashioned, what we used to call the blue chips. They pay dividends. They're not terribly exciting or sexy. They're not Tesla going up and down 10 or 15% a day. But for investors who are interested in preservation of wealth and long-term accumulation of wealth, potentially with some income needs on the side that healthy dividend yields can meet, that's the sectors of the market where we find the best value and the best long-term plays.
What about the Russell 2000? I'm going to throw this at you because I harp on this every single day. I'm looking at it. It's the small mid cap shares that have underperformed down on the year, even as you see new records on the S&P and NASDAQ.
Yeah, and that's not a new thing. If you look at the performance of large cap versus small cap domestic stocks going back 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years even, the large caps have outpaced the small and medium caps. And it surprises me.
Well, what's the message?
You would think in an environment in which there are concerns about global trade, well predating the coronavirus outbreak. I mean, think of just the ongoing China-U.S. trade dispute. Domestic companies ought to be doing better than companies with a big multinational exposure. So we have in our portfolios actually dialed up that smaller mid-cap exposure. We've also dialed up the non-dollar exposure as well, because non-dollar assets, both emerging and international, have vastly lagged the good old-fashioned S&P 500. So we think increasingly that's where the value plays are. That's not a bearish call on the markets. It's just an observation of where the bigger opportunities lie.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned emerging markets because we've been talking about that as well this morning. And I'm looking to just bring up the 5-year chart of the MSCI Emerging Markets Index versus the S&P 500, and clear underperformance. And that underperformance even widened out a little bit in 2019 and 2020. What's the catalyst for, can an emerging markets call work in a world where we have trade tensions, phase one deal or not withstanding, and maybe some kind of threat to global growth from this exogenous factor called the coronavirus?
It's hard, Paul, because those are substantial obstacles to sentiment at least. But if you look back even, and I don't have it in front of me, but in a mind's eye, over a 10-year trailing period, the S&P 500 large cap U.S. has outpaced emerging markets in dollars, like-for-like comparison, by 1,000 basis points annualized. That's an extraordinary rate of performance differential. It doesn't necessarily mean there are valuation opportunities in the emerging world, but it strongly hints at it. The problem, of course, with a value-based investing approach is as good as it is, and it's what we do, it's our bread and butter, it's a horrible timing tool because cheap things can get cheaper, and that's been the story in emerging markets. But the valuation gap between the developed world and the emerging world is wider than it's been since the summer of 1998. And you have to cast your memory back, but that was the sort of getting close to the peak of the dot-com bubble here in the States, but rolling crises throughout the rest of the world. Venezuelan debt crisis, Thai baht crisis, Russian debt. I mean, pretty horrible time for emerging equities. We're back to that level of gap between valuations of the two markets.
When does the coronavirus and, more importantly, the ripple effects from it economically become something more than noise and potentially even change your thesis?
It's a good question. And the difficulty with that is, as unpredictable as the virus itself is, people's reaction to it is even more unpredictable. Institutional reaction to it is more unpredictable. So not to diminish the human tragedy of it, the decisions by various governments to quarantine whole cities, to shut down air routes, to shut down trade, it's kind of the right thing to do. You want to limit the susceptible part of the population to the virus spread, but it'll certainly punch a hole in first quarter GDP. I think we'll get an early indication of that from some bellwether companies. I mean, listen to not only the earnings report, but interim reports from FedEx or UPS or even Boeing on airplane orders, certainly airlines themselves. We won't get the GDP numbers till late April. Distant future from now. So we're listening to the anecdotal information coming out of companies. So far, we think it's sort of 1/10%, 0.2% hit to GDP, domestic GDP in the first quarter. But there's no question that if the response to it is exacerbated, the hit could be bigger.
It's an election year. Do we care historically as equity investors?
Historically, no, but there's nothing about this election that's historically normal. And part of the challenge, Paul, is that the Democratic field in particular is still so wide that we haven't really honed in on what genuine policy proposals might be. So I could certainly spend some time analyzing the most recent tax proposal or trade proposal from any number of Democratic camps. But at this point, candidates are still vying for lanes. They're still throwing more ideas out than there are actual policies. So it's hard to tell. I think once we get past, probably not until Super Tuesday, will that field begin to narrow to a point where we can actually analyze what the likely implications are of a smaller handful of potential Democratic outcomes. There's no question in my mind, though, that political developments this year could be the cause, or at least the blame, for a market correction, the likes of which we haven't seen since August of last year. We're sort of overdue one.
the blame for it. I like the way you couch that. Scott Clemens, well crafted. Scott Clemens, Chief Investment Strategist at Brown Brothers Harriman, overseeing about $40 billion. And he joins us here in our interactive broker studios right now, just looking at equities. Well, you can't keep a rally down. That seems to be definitely the theme today. We've got the NASDAQ near session highs, up 0.5%. The NASDAQ up, the S&P up 0.3%, and the Dow. And it's sort of an interesting question, and we're going to keep digging into this, Paul, throughout the next hour, which is, are bonds sending a dissonant message to what we're seeing in equities? We've got yields lower today. Typically, yields lower, bond price higher indicates a risk-off feel, and yet this is coming in tandem with a rally, trying to understand this dynamic. Are they compatible?
Right.
We'll discuss. I'm Lisa Abramos, along with Paul Sweetie. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Good.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Sign up to Walk All Over Cancer with Cancer Research UK. Walk 10,000 steps every day in March and help raise money for life-saving research.
Are you ready, Boots?
Know any friends keen on walks?
Start walking.
Use the 10,000 Steps a Day Challenge to explore London, get fit, and help beat cancer. Come on, search Walk All Over Cancer and sign up now.
It's already chilly in London, and you know that dodgy boiler is on its last legs. So if the thought of no heating makes you break out in a cold sweat, talk to British Gas. You can spread the cost of a new boiler interest-free over 2 years and get £200 off when you get a quote by the 29th of February, or £400 off for existing home care customers. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas new boiler. Conditions apply.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, it was Hollywood's big night last night, the Oscars. We'll take a look at who the winners and losers were. Plus, we'll take a look at the diamond business and the increase in consumer interest in sustainability and social responsibility in mining those diamonds. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, what do you got?
Well, Paul, still higher, but off earlier highs while European and Asian stocks slipped during their sessions. Investors are struggling to gauge the economic hit from coronavirus while preparing for more corporate earnings to come in. Treasuries and European bonds turned higher, and the dollar's little change versus a basket of its major peers. John Norman, J.P. Morgan, tells Bloomberg events like coronavirus are not new to markets.
They've seen a general family of this type of demand shock, whether it's previous epidemics, whether it's natural disasters, and they know or they've seen that these shocks only last a quarter. So even though it seems somewhat unique, it's not wholly unique, and I don't think the market reactions are completely irrational or complacent.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg. S&P 500's up 0.3%, up 11. Dow's up 0.3%, up 82, and the Nasdaq's up 0.5%, up 47. The 10-year is up 7/32, the yield 1.55%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.4% at $50.11 per barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% at $15.7740 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.73. The euro's $1.0924. The British pound $1.2923. Billionaire Peter Thiel, an early investor in Facebook who once controlled 45 million shares, unloaded most of his remaining stake last week. He's a member of Facebook's board, sold 53,602 shares last week, leaving him with about $2 million in stock. Right now, Facebook is up 0.4%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa and Paul.
So much. Bloomberg Markets brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Just want to let you know that we are awaiting comments from President Trump. He's speaking at the White House business session with governors from around the nation. We will bring you those when we get them. Right now, however, it's for my favorite segment, always. We've got Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks Editor, here with us. And let's take a look at those small and mid-cap shares, which are now down on the year, despite the fact that we have seen continued new highs on the S&P and NASDAQ. What's going on today?
Well, I mean, they're up, but not enough to get rid of that loss for the year. The Russell 2000 index up 0.25%, and the S&P 500 is up 0.33%. So not quite keeping up, but pretty close. All that said, the biggest gain in the Russell belongs to Adverum Biotechnologies, whose ticker is ADVM. The drug developer has risen 29% on favorable study results about a proposed medicine for an eye disorder. Edgewell Personal Care, ticker EPC, has climbed 24.5%. The maker of Schick Razors posted fiscal first quarter earnings and gave a full year profit forecast that beat analyst average estimates in a Bloomberg survey. Edgewell scrapped a deal to buy rival Harry's for $1.4 billion after U.S. regulators objected last week. And Inovio Pharmaceuticals, ticker INO, has added 14%. U.S. regulators allowed the company to begin studying a treatment for an ailment caused by the human papillomavirus, otherwise known as HPV. Now, one of the steepest declines in the Russell belongs to Biohaven Pharmaceuticals. Ticker there is BHVN. It's down 11%. The company's proposed medication for anxiety failed in a final stage study. And Motorcar Parts of America, ticker MPAA, is down 10%. The parts maker's fiscal third quarter results came up short of estimates.
Bloomberg Stocks Editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Last night, the Oscars, Hollywood's big night. Parasite came away as the big winner, winning the Picture of the Year. I watched some of the telecast last night. It was pretty interesting. It was pretty fun, seeing the stars out having fun. What does that mean for the business of Hollywood? Let's look at that. Geetha Ranganathan, she covers everything media for Bloomberg Intelligence. She's a senior analyst based down in the Princeton office of Bloomberg Intelligence. Geetha, thanks so much for joining us. Just wondering about, you cover and follow the economics and financial impacts of the media business. If a film wins Best Picture, does it really mean anything from the bottom line perspective?
Well, so thank you, Paul and Lisa, for having me. So yes, it definitely does create a lot of buzz for the movie, but I don't necessarily think it translates into a huge bounce in terms of box office dollars. We've seen kind of a whole shift in the industry over the past few months where more and more movies are kind of going to streaming services, think Netflix, think Amazon.com. And so when that happens, obviously that's really not translating into any box office impact at all.
Do you watch the Oscars, Geetha?
I watched a little bit, not the entire program.
Do you know anyone who watched the whole program?
Advertisers, probably.
I know, but I'm serious. I mean, this sort of goes to sort of the relevancy of them, especially in an era of streaming.
But they don't get big ratings for ABC.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they've been on the decline, no?
Right, yes.
And I just am wondering about the relevancy and how, from their perspective, they need to include Netflix more to seem more relevant with the common sort of shifts in trends, and whether they did that sufficiently. What's your take?
So, it's kind of an interesting thing. I think it was pretty much business as usual. Obviously, as you just mentioned, Lisa, ratings have kind of been declining all across the board, so not just for the award ceremonies, but still it kind of brings in, as Paul pointed out, about $80 million in advertising. There's obviously been a huge shift. I mean, we kind of saw that just kind of heading into the ceremony, just in terms of nominations, with, Netflix kind of taking 24 nominations, more than any traditional studio. So obviously they're having a bigger and bigger impact. Of course, they didn't win big, so that was a little bit of a disappointment, but I don't think it was necessarily surprising or shocking.
Okay, here's how I think people watch it, Paul. Yeah. I think that people begin to watch it, then they turn it off because they have jobs and other things like that. And then the next day, they might look at the way people dressed. They might look at the articles about, what the highlights were, who won. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how everyone who I've
But again, as Geeta mentioned, it gets a big number, big audience, a lot of advertising dollars. It's still an event television, maybe not as much as it used to be, or as, it's still one of the things. It's not the Super Bowl, but it's pretty big. Geeta, you mentioned Netflix and how they got a bunch of nominations, but they didn't really win much this year. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think, first of all, does Netflix even care if they win awards? Or how do they kind of view that?
I think they do care. I think Netflix views the Oscars as a key to establishing its credibility as a go-to place for, top-tier original content. They've established kind of their name in television. I think now they're really kind of trying to get this breakthrough with films and Oscars. They spent a whole boatload of money in terms of campaigning, so more than upwards of $100 million, which is, a pretty big sum considering the traditional studio. So obviously it's important to them. Having said that, though, at the end of the day, it's really kind of being in the awards conversation is really more important for them, because I think what they want to do is they want to draw attention to the service, to the movies on the platform, and I think they kind of succeeded in doing that.
Geeta, thank you so much for being with us. Geeta Ranganathan, tech and media analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. We appreciate it. I'm really just curious. I mean, honestly, I'm looking right now at the viewers, and there was an uptick, actually, a slight uptick last year in the viewers, but the year before was a record low in terms of, or a recent low. It had been the lowest in a bunch of years, which is just, again, I wonder, and to sort of put this in the larger perspective of streaming, there's a question of which are the events that keep people with cords, right? Keep people tied to the cable. And people talk about sports events, and they talk about things like the Oscars. And I'm just wondering at what point we hit that threshold.
We're getting closer, I think.
We're getting closer where it matters less, where all of a sudden the 30-second spot doesn't command the same kind of premium for some of these events. And I don't think we're anywhere close to that if you look at some of the numbers here, but I think that it's a relevant conversation in tandem with the recognition on the other side that Netflix is getting at the Oscars. A kind of interesting shift going on as we watch the transformation of the media industry. Right now, let's head down to our 19 Now studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, it's the day before the New Hampshire primary, and the Democrats running for president have been taking sharper aim at each other after last week's muddled result in Iowa. Bloomberg's Kevin Cirilli has more from Manchester. Hampshire.
It's Bernie Sanders to lose here in the Granite State, followed by former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. A trio of polls coming out collectively that shows some momentum for Senator Amy Klobuchar. She's trying to build upon her strong debate showing, and pressure mounting for former Vice President Joe Biden in terms of where he goes.
Biden is banking on strong showings in Nevada and South Carolina later this month. President Trump will also be in New Hampshire tonight for a campaign rally in Manchester. Ahead of that, the White House has released its budget request for the next fiscal year. The $4.8 trillion proposal calls for billions more in defense spending. It would add $5.6 trillion in deficits over 10 years. The coronavirus death toll is up to 910, more than during the SARS outbreak. More than 40,000 people are infected. Almost all of those are in China. But the number of cases on a Princess cruise ship under quarantine in Japan nearly doubled overnight to more than 130. This passenger says she's not even leaving her cabin.
So we've decided not to participate in the walks on deck that the captains arranged for people. We're fortunate fortunate we've got the outside cabin with the balcony.
And the UK reported 4 more cases linked to a ski resort in France. Bill and Melinda Gates are putting a new focus on climate change and gender equality. They announced that in a letter marking the 20th anniversary of their namesake foundation. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia,
aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the ad.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
I am a force for good.
I am a force for courage.
And for calm.
I am a force for safety.
For fairness. For leadership.
I am a force for the future.
For compassion.
For my community.
I am a police officer.
And I am a force for all.
Be one of the 20,000 new police officers and be a force for all that you believe in. Search Join the Police.
The famous five were discussing their next adventure to Oxford. Let's visit Christchurch Tower, said Dick. The Bodleian Library, added Julian. Magdalen Bridge, cried Anne. Dick jumped up. We'd better leave now. Oxford is so far away. Relax, said George. It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas. London to Oxford in as little as 44 minutes. So adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Fastest train from Paddington to Oxford. Terms and conditions apply.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Rita's Rowdy Enchiladas.
Every time the kids are together, it's always the same. Never a moment's peace. Didn't take me long to work out the trick, though. Shredded chicken and black bean enchiladas with lime, oregano, and my little secret. A bit of smoke and spice with chipotle paste. Hear that? Never failed yet.
Make Rita's Rowdy Enchiladas tonight with
with Tesco British Chicken. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco.
Light up the life of someone special this Valentine's Day with the Perfume Shop. We all know nothing smells as good as the person you love. This Valentine's Day with 20% off second items. Treat them and treat yourself. Think the Perfume Shop for that personal finishing touch. Visit us in store or online at theperfumeshop.com. Offer ends 14th of Feb. T's and C's apply. Visit the website for details.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Well, the S&P's up, but not as much as it was just about a half hour ago. All sectors but energy are gaining. Treasuries and European bonds edge higher. The dollar's a little change versus peers. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 0.3% of 10. Dow's up 0.25% up 70. Nasdaq's up 0.5% up 46. The 10-year is up 7/30 seconds with a yield of 1.55%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.4% at $50.12 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.3% at $15.78 even per ounce. The dollar yen 109.76. The euro $1.0918, and the British pound $1.2923. The Department of Justice has just announced charges against 4 members of China's People Liberation Army for the 2017 hack of Equifax. That's according to Attorney General William Barr. Barr says the charges stem from breaking into the computer systems of the credit reporting company and stealing intellectual property and sensitive personal information. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
I think it's fitting, Paul, at a time when gold is absolutely in vogue for us to focus on another precious stone of sorts, or metal. Not a precious metal, stone, diamonds. Let's talk diamonds. And luckily we have with us the expert, Debbie Azar, president and co-founder of Gemological Science International, based in New York, joining us here in our Interactive Brokers studios, focusing on evaluating, studying precious gems, and in particular diamonds, for years. And Debbie, I just want to get started because we've had people on this program talking about lab-grown diamonds and that's going to absolutely revolutionize the entire industry because you can't tell the difference. Have you seen real inroads made by the lab-grown diamond producers? And do you think that it does materially affect the value of the naturally found diamond?
Yeah, well, right now, overall, it's an $87 billion industry, and only 2% of that right now is lab-grown diamonds. You can definitely, as a laboratory, we see both on a daily basis. So we certify natural diamonds, and we also certify lab-grown diamonds. They are not the same thing, and it's important for consumers to really understand what the key differences are. Either option is fine as long as you really understand what you're purchasing and also the reason for your purchase. But from, let's say, a gemological standpoint, they have the same chemical, optical, and physical properties, but they're not the same in the sense of their origin, where they came from, and also the time that they took to grow. So natural diamonds are billions of years old. They're formed hundreds of miles beneath the Earth's surface. They're rare, they're precious. No two are ever the same. And the supply will eventually exhaust itself. Lab-grown diamonds are really technology at its finest. They're grown in factories over weeks or months. And because we can always grow more, the supply is infinite. And that does leave a lot of possibilities for where it can be used.
So are people still buying diamonds as much as they used to? What's the trend in kind of diamond demand?
Yeah, absolutely. So people are still buying diamonds, and I think consumers are just doing this a lot differently than they used to. I think retailers have done a really great job of enhancing the consumer's overall buying experience and shopping experience. So whether it's online or in store, and today for consumers, it's become a real integrated journey. Many will start online to do a lot of research or homework about what they're buying, and then they'll walk into a store to really look, see, feel, and experience the product. And it's all about really creating an informative, educational, and really memorable experience. It's all about when the consumer wants to buy, how they want to buy, and where they want to buy. And they're still buying diamonds today.
I'm struggling to understand the correlation between the haven asset, the sort of store of value, and precious gems. We certainly see it with gold to a large degree, although there are a lot of other factors. Is there a sort of commensurate increase in value during times of uncertainty for diamonds?
For diamonds, yes, definitely. Diamonds historically have always maintained their value. Diamonds have inherent value, and over time, they do appreciate. You know, I think many consumers, the reason that they like natural diamonds is they can always upgrade, they can trade it in. There's a secondhand market for them. With lab-grown diamonds right now, it's still something that's very new, so we're uncertain about the long-term value of it. And of course, since it's something we can continue to grow more and more, with time, that could mean that the value will go down a little bit.
So on this show, we talk a lot about investing in stocks and bonds. And one of the things we hear about from investors is increased interest in ESG, environmental, social, governance. And I know in the diamond industry, that's a big issue as well. You hear, I'm sure you're getting more and more questions from consumers about that. What's kind of the status of the industry as it relates to that? Where the diamonds come from and how they're sourced and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, consumers are all about transparency, and they want to know all about their diamonds, where they came from. It's interesting, at GSI, we were one of the first laboratories to offer a mines to market report, which tells you all about your diamond's journey from the mine all the way to the market. And I think it's really important for people to understand also the millions of jobs that the industry provides around the world, the social benefits that we provide, and how we sustain local economies around the world. We provide jobs in some of the most remote regions in the world, in Africa, India, Northwest Canada, Western Australia, deep in Siberia. And by providing these high quality and safe jobs, and also through the local sourcing of products and services, we're able to really provide significant, long-lasting, positive impacts on these economies. And if we can bring in even Botswana is probably a great example of this, because it's one of the world's greatest development success stories. And before diamonds were discovered there were only 4 miles of paved roads. Today there's over 4,000. Poverty's been cut in half. Every child receives a free education. There's now over 300 schools. And this is really all because of the economic stability our industry is able to provide to help create basic infrastructure, healthcare, education, and clean water.
Debbie Azar, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming in here. Debbie Azar, President and co-founder, Gemological Science International, based here in New York, joining us here on our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. I didn't know there was such a thing as lab-grown diamonds. I didn't know it was a
it's
thing.
Actually a growing industry that basically they've come out with a way to actually replicate the billions of years that it took to generate diamonds. But then it sort of raises a question of their store of value. But I, of course, start looking at store of value. And, you know, if you want to raise questions about anything, if Bitcoin's considered a store of value, you know, I mean, but, you know, what is value?
Exactly right. Looking right here, we have some value in the equity markets here. The S&P up just about 11 points here. It's about 0.3%. The Dow up 76 points, 29,179 on the Dow. We have Nasdaq up 51 points. That's about 0.5% on Nasdaq. The Treasury market a little bit of a bid to the 10-year bond. It's up 7/30 seconds, edging that yield down about 2.5 basis points to 1.55%. Crude. WTI crude now below 50. More pressure downward on crude. This is Bloomberg Markets.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are moving higher, even as investors are struggling to gauge the economic hit from the spreading coronavirus. The S&P rising, lifted by industrial and consumer shares. The parent company of Popeyes higher in trading after earnings topped analyst estimates. Restaurant Brands said same-store sales at the chain surged 34% in the fourth quarter, boosted by its popular chicken sandwich. Restaurant Brands also owns Burger King and Tim Hortons. Facebook is pledging to improve security to resolve a lawsuit that blames the company for a data breach in 2018 that exposed the personal data of 29 million users. The social network said it will check more frequently for suspicious activity. And Samsung showed off its new, more compact, foldable smartphone last night. The debut took place in a commercial during the Oscars. Bloomberg has learned the phone will be called the Galaxy Z Flip. There will be a big launch event for the device tomorrow in San Francisco. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Light up the life of someone special this Valentine's Day with the Perfume Shop. We all know nothing smells as good as the person you love. This Valentine's Day with 20% off second items. Treat them and treat yourself. Think the Perfume Shop for that personal finishing touch. Visit us in store or online at theperfumeshop.com. Offer ends 14th of Feb. T's and C's apply. Visit the website for details.
Dear Cass, Sweet Pea, not sure what I did to deserve a love like yours. I'm so lucky. You make me want to be a better man. Mind, body, and soul.
Pork balls, fried rice, kung pao chicken, spring rolls extra fried, order 55.
Yeah, here. Happy Valentine's, my love, forever, your little boop. This Valentine's Day, heartfelt can happen anywhere with Moonpig.com. Get £10 off when you send someone special 24 roses. Download the app today. Exclusions apply.
This is the Survivalist Network. It's been 1 day since the zombies appeared. I haven't slept since Saturday. My zombie neighbour just tried to bite my arm off. Luckily, he couldn't get his infected fingers past the high tensile steel of my Toyota Hilux Invincible. That £199 per month with 0% APR representative is feeling like excellent value now. Get to a Toyota Hilux Invincible. You'll be fine.
0% APR representative on new sales of Hilux Invincible over 42 months. £199 per month. Customer deposit of £10,246 when financed through Access Toyota by 31st of March 2020. £12,525 optional final payment. Subject status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
Good morning. This is your Southern service to London, Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes. Canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking, and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June. featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA On Demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we'll take a look at the extreme shift in European politics overnight. We got some interesting developments over in Germany as well as in Ireland, frankly. Plus, we're going to be speaking about what the latest is with respect to national security threats on a host of fronts. Right now, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
The stocks are still in the green right now, Lisa, edging just a bit higher, while European and Asian stocks are down. Investors are seeking to gauge the economic hit from spreading coronavirus while preparing for more corporate earnings. Kit Jukes, Societe Generale Chief FX Strategist, tells Bloomberg the virus shock will put emerging markets at increased risk.
But if we get more of a slowdown in China and a slowdown in the United States, there's a lot of emerging market economies that are going to be under pressure. And I do think when you look at emerging market currencies, more than anything else, it's all about growth. That's going to be what drives their currencies. So anything that threatens that keeps this trend going.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 0.4%, up 12. Dow's up 0.3%, up 84, and the Nasdaq's up 0.6%, up 58. The 10-year is up 7/30 seconds. The yield is 1.55%. West Texas Intermediate crude is back under $50 a barrel, down 1% at $49.83 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.3% at $15.7780 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 109.78. The euro's $1.912, and the British pound $1.2913. Interesting news from Amazon.com. Apparently, they've asked the U.S. Court of Federal Claims to allow their company, their attorneys, to question President Donald Trump and its lawsuit challenging the loss of a highly lucrative cloud contract to Microsoft. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Interesting news out of Germany this morning. We all know that Germany needs a new successor to Angela Merkel, who is stepping down, and it seemed like there was a pretty smooth process in place, but that just got upended this morning. To get the latest, we welcome Andreas Kluth, member of the Bloomberg editorial board, joining us from Berlin. Andreas, thanks so much for joining us. Just give us the background of what happened in Germany over the last 24 hours.
Well, actually, it's been happening over the last 5 days, and it started with a regional scandal, shall we say, in a state you've never heard of, Thuringia. It used to be in East Germany, and a far-right party called the Alternative for Germany, some say it's sort of proto-fascist, essentially helped a candidate win. It was not an AfD candidate, not a CDU candidate, by voting on the same side as the party, the Christian Democrats of Angela Merkel. And that was such a scandal that the various people have, there were protests in the streets and everything. And now the chairman of the boss of the party, Angela, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, everyone just calls her AKK because you can't pronounce that, stepped down. And as you said, she was actually slated or tipped by Angela Merkel to be her successor, not only as party boss, but maybe next year as chancellor. And so that's not going to happen anymore.
Andreas, just to take a 10,000-foot view, if people aren't following the intricacies of the German election, can you give us a sense of where this fits in the narrative that we sometimes hear with an increasing shift toward a more populist, more extremist politics in Germany, which has been held by the center for a long time?
I think, first of all, it's a German trend, but it's actually, the trend came late to Germany. It's a European trend. And the first trend that happened, and it's been going on for decades, is not a shift towards the populist right, it's a fragmentation. So, for instance, in Germany, for almost all of post-war history, or for the first half of it, you had two large parties and a smaller one figuring this out. There are three parties. Then a fourth, the Greens joined, then another one, the left, the post-communist left joined, and now the Alternative for Germany. So there are more and more parties all over Europe, and that makes it harder to form coalitions and majorities. And now simultaneously, there has in recent years been a shift in Austria first, and now in Germany and everywhere, to the right. And that is in part also a response to the refugee crisis we had a few years ago, and some people say xenophobic backlash and these other things. So it's getting more complicated to just have stable government with majorities, because some of these parties are unsavory. You don't want to have coalitions with them, but the mathematics of these parliaments is very complicated.
So, Andreas, I think the European Union probably looks upon this political instability in Germany with some trepidation, given the size of the German economy and the influence within the European Union. What are some of the concerns that you think could develop to the extent that this instability kind of persists for a while?
You mean concerns for whom now? For
concerns for Germany, the economy, for its the stability of the European Union.
Yes. I mean, now, in both of those, the concern should be zero. And, in fact, it is zero. This has actually almost nothing to do with the economy, which is not a good thing, but a bad thing, because it means the present government, the last one of Angela Merkel, is doing nothing. There is no economic policy. There is no reform. She's a lame duck. So everyone's just waiting for this to be over, which is in somewhat less than 2 years, for someone to make policy again. So, and this won't really affect that. And on the European level, that's a bigger problem, because all of Europe, especially France, has been waiting for Germany to do something, and Germany isn't doing anything again because they're just waiting. I don't think, as of what I know today, that this crisis will accelerate the coming about of a new German government, so I don't think there'll be much change.
Without that acceleration, without much change, is there any chance of some sort of fiscal stimulus, which is what markets have been looking for from Germany in particular?
No, unfortunately not. I've been arguing, the editorial board's been arguing it forever. The whole world wants it. That is a Christian Democrat thing. It's a bit of a fetish that you have to save. Even the government has to save and can't spend. They even have a law, a constitutional amendment called the debt break. They're not allowed to spend. I don't see any. This is more about this crisis is about how should mainstream parties deal with the far right. And they can't figure that out. This is not about fiscal stimulus, which is really more of a topic for the outside world, asking of Germany rather than for Germans to be discussing with each other.
Andreas Kluth, thank you so much for being with us. Andreas Kluth, member of the Bloomberg editorial board, joining us from Berlin, talking about the latest details of the German election that does not appear to be getting closer to some sort of resolution, leaving, frankly, a gaping hole in leadership at a time when a lot of people are saying that monetary stimulus is running out of power with respect to stimulating any kind of growth in the European region.
And as Andreas mentioned, it's really not even a topic within Germany for fiscal stimulus. I mean, it's just so ingrained in, I think, their collective, kind of view of the world that they don't feel the need to stimulate their economy, even though maybe the ECB and other folks will be asking for it.
Yeah, they've had a balanced budget kind of policy for a long time. It's funny to think that that's being cast as irresponsible right now by a lot of people when you look at the deficit that would be incurred from the budget that we just got from President Trump. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with world and national headlines. Nathan.
All right, Lisa, thanks. This is the final day of campaigning before tomorrow's Democratic presidential primary in New Hampshire. And the latest polls in the Granite State show Bernie Sanders with a firm lead.
What happens here in New Hampshire is enormously important. The whole country is not only looking at New Hampshire, in fact, the whole world is looking at New Hampshire.
Joe Biden is looking at fourth place against Elizabeth Warren in most New Hampshire polls, but the former vice president's deputy campaign manager tells a Bloomberg News Reporters Roundtable that Biden is determined to compete beyond tomorrow night. He does still have a lead in South Carolina with its large African-American voter base. The Justice Department has charged 4 members of China's military with the 2017 Equifax hack. Attorney General William Barr says they stole more than 140 million Americans' data through the credit agency's dispute resolution system.
Once in the network, the hackers spent weeks conducting reconnaissance, uploading malicious software, and stealing login credentials.
Barr is also acknowledging for the first time that President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, is passing along information collected in Ukraine. The Attorney General is not being more specific than that, but Giuliani has said he's been looking into Joe and Hunter Biden's activities in the country. The coronavirus death toll is now higher than the SARS outbreak at more than 900. More than 40,000 people have been infected worldwide. Researchers at Imperial College London put the estimated mortality rate from the virus at 1%, though in China's Hubei province, where the outbreak began, it may be 18%. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
The famous five were discussing their next adventure to Oxford. "Let's visit Christchurch Tower," said Dick. "The Bodleian Library," added Julian. "Magdalen Bridge," cried Anne. Dick jumped up. "We'd better leave now. Oxford is so far away." "Relax," said George. "It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pajamas." London to Oxford in as little as 44 minutes. So adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Fastest train from Paddington to Oxford. Terms and conditions apply.
The UK has now left the EU, and we are in a transition period until the end of the year. Throughout this period, the government will be forging new partnerships with the EU and the rest of the world. This could lead to new arrangements for trade, travel, and business. To find out about the changes and how they might affect you, go to gov.uk/transition.
3, 2, 1, lift off!
What have you done with my OCT eye scanner? I'm supposed to be doing an eye scan with Mrs. Green.
We launched it, like you said.
Well, I meant launch it to the public, not on a rocket.
Oh.
Tell them how it takes a hospital-grade 3D image that could help detect eye conditions up to 4 years earlier.
Oh, sugar.
And that it's available at Specsavers.
fevers. Oh, and now also in outer space.
Introducing our most advanced eye exam with OCT scans. Search Specsavers OCT to find out more. Charge applies. OCT available at selected stores.
Had the same job for the last 15 years. Working with the same people, in the same office, drinking tea from the same comedy mug, eating the same crayfish and rocket sandwich every lunchtime, using the same business jargon, and climbing the same greasy pole. What does that even mean? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. With its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are edging higher following a big gain in the market last week. Large retailers, including Amazon.com and tech companies, are leading the way higher. Energy companies, including ExxonMobil, are lagging the market as oil prices move lower. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 0.4%, up 14. The Dow's up 0.3%, up 98. And the Nasdaq's up 0.7%, up 67. The 10-year is up 7/30 seconds. The yield is 1.55%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.9% now at $49.87 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.3% at $15.7770 an ounce. The dollar yen, 109.78. The euro's $1.912. And the British pound, $1.2917. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We are awaiting comments from President Trump from the White House as he speaks to the nation's governor's business session there. We will bring that to you when available. But one of the fallouts from the Senate acquittal of President Trump is President Trump has kind of seeking retribution on those that he feels were against him during the impeachment process. We saw on Friday, 2 days after being acquitted, Gordon Sondland announced that he had been ousted as a U.S. ambassador to the European Union. Army Lieutenant Colonel Vindman from the National Security Council also let go. So lots of issues going on here as it relates to kind of the fallout from the impeachment process. To get some color, we welcome Clint Watts. Clint's a distinguished research fellow for the Foreign Policy Research Institute. He's also a senior fellow at the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security at George Washington University. Clint, so lots going on here. We also had some New York being part of a global entry program being revoked by the president. So the question is, how much does all of this impact kind of our national security, our security apparatus? What are some of the fallouts, do you think, if any?
I think the big thing is that people will become reflexive and withhold. Meaning, if I were in government right now, I think you'd always try and gauge, do you deliver the president something he doesn't want to hear, and what are the consequences of that? And I think it's pretty consistent over the president's term here that you see him being retaliatory if he doesn't necessarily get what he wants or hear what he wants. And he also sees U.S. government officials, longtime public servants, as loyalists or not loyalists, which means you have to pick a side. And so that can be troubling both in terms of executing national security and foreign policy for sure. I thought Gordon Sondland's testimony was quite remarkable when he went to Congress, because he basically said everybody was in on this and I was in on it. I thought it was fine, and this is what actually happened. And so when you look at kind of how this is played out now over the last couple of months, now he's suddenly on the stick end instead of the carrot. So I think it can be troublesome over time. It's very hard to run a government that way.
Clint, there's a question about the morale among national security professionals. Then there's a question about national security itself with some of the measures. And when we talk about the global entry issues, basically President Trump proposing to bar New Yorkers from enrolling in it or applying for it newly, there's a question of how much of a national security threat are programs like global reentry and things where people have expedited access through security lines. I mean, is there some true threat that has emerged as a result of them?
Yeah, I don't think there's been a true threat. I think, by and large, what you find is that if you give more data and information to the government, you give up more privacy of your information, then you can get accelerated through these processes. I think what's interesting about it is it really plays to the access to the wealthy, meaning that if you have money, you can buy these things. It's not a cheap service. I think it's a couple $100 that you have to do. You have to spend additional time to go out to the airport and get screened. And so if you're someone of lower means, you're obviously not going to be able to do that. So it's kind of an access program. It does beg the question, though, of who can get that access, and what are the requirements for it, or does it give people extra value? Like if you're a foreign adversary, can you work your way into those systems? It's unlikely. It's probably a low probability event, but it just shows that there's not a universal acceptance of what security is, that there are different standards for different kinds of people.
So, Clint, as it relates to some of these whistleblowers and the retribution, I'm thinking about the Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman being pushed out of his position. Is that in the prerogative? To what extent is that in the prerogative of President Trump? How common is that type of thing, or is this kind of out of the bounds?
It is in the prerogative of the president to do that. It's just quite uncommon. I just saw a report, I think a couple hours ago, that Vindman was already asking or sort of requesting to be moved from his position when his natural time was to come through. Usually these are 1, 2, 3 year assignments, for the military folks that go over to the White House on these details. But why not let that just naturally come to pass? Why do you have to force the issue? I don't see anything Vindman did as being out of line. He was asked to go testify to Congress, which has oversight function. He did. When he had concerns inside the government, he went through an approved and not a wide open public process. So that sort of begs the question, what do we expect these people in the government to do when called to Congress? And it really also shows just how weak the legislative branch and oversight of Congress has become in comparison to the executive branch. President Trump has pushed the limits on all of these things. And it also just begs the question, why do this? If he might have cycled out in the next few weeks or months, why go this extra step of really pushing him out of the White House other than to make a public spectacle of it?
Yeah, Clint, I do want to just, if I were Tom Keene, rip up the script just a little bit, because I know your most recent book, Messing with the Enemy, Surviving in a Social Media World of Hackers, Terrorists, Russians, and Fake News, that while all of this political drama is going on, we got the announcement from Attorney General Bill Barr today about the Equifax hack back in 2017, basically charging China's People's Liberation Army for hacking into Equifax and stealing the information of millions and millions of customers. I'm wondering, do you feel on the balance like we've gotten safer or less safe when it comes to our ability to counter and detect some of these potential hacks?
I think we've gotten a lot better. What I would point out, I was thrilled that the Justice Department did that today. What I'd point out, though, is that actually occurred in 2017. So there's some things to think about. One, what China was doing and has done and continues to do is build up big data from around the world. And big data powers artificial intelligence. It is the fuel for that machine. The more data you have, the more you can learn. The more you can learn, the more you can power your economy. And this comes at a time where here in the United States, we're talking about data privacy and beating up on big tech in our own country. China's running wild in the space. And so they have fuel from their own country and from the West now. And so when we look at how we retaliate on this, we're talking about 4 hackers, I think, that came out in the indictment. They've probably hacked thousands more times in the last 2.5 years since that happened. And it really shows how long it takes to do one of these investigations and how weak our retaliatory measures really are. We're going to indict those 4 hackers and nothing will happen to them ultimately. But the good news is we're finally coming around to building a system and doing something about it, something we've not been able to do really for the last decade.
Clint Watts, thank you so much for being with us. Clint Watts, Distinguished Research Fellow for Foreign Policy Research Institute, also the author of Messing with the Enemy, Surviving in a Social Media World of Hackers, Terrorists, Russians, and Fake News.
Yeah, it's interesting, the commentary about the hacking. It's just a question, where you think about that, and it's just... as good as the defenses can be, as much money as companies invest in protecting their data, the other side is also making strides as well. So it seems like what we've heard from the experts as it relates to hacking, cybersecurity, a never-ending, kind of battle between the hackers and the folks being hacked. So we'll obviously pay attention to that. S&P up 11 here to end our morning session. Along with Lisa Bronwitz, I'm Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local...
The Dacia Duster has won what car? Best family SUV less than £20,000 for the 2nd year running. Time to roll out the fanfare. Starting from only $10,995, our prices are pretty modest. Just like our celebrations. Visit dacia.co.uk to find out more about our range of award-winning cars. Dacia, you do the maths.
The Iowa caucuses were an epic fail, a fiasco, and an invitation for suspicion.
No matter what the results are now, they're going to be questioned in terms of their authenticity.
How we got this system in the first place and other tales from primary land on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA On Demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Manchester, New Hampshire, to our TV and radio audiences worldwide. I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. We are broadcasting live from Manchester for the New Hampshire primary, which is tomorrow. But we want to start today with the policy priorities of the current president. The Trump administration is due to release its annual budget proposal this hour. And joining us now from the White House is the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget. He is Russ Vought. So, Mr. Vought, thank you so much for joining us. Give us the headlines from your point of view, from the president's point of view. What are the headlines of this budget proposal?
Sure, it's a very important budget proposal to tackle our debt and deficits. It balances the budget in 15 years with $4.6 trillion in deficit reduction. Historic, more than any president has proposed in history. We have a 5% cut to non-defense discretionary spending. We keep defense growing so that the military rebuild continues. And we make reforms where necessary with regard to programs like welfare reform with a work requirement to get people off of a cycle of dependency and onto a ladder of economic opportunity.
So, Mr. Vought, let's talk about that deficit reduction. As you say, maybe we won't be losing quite as much money as we thought we were, but it's still adding to the deficit. I think over 10 years, something like $5.6 trillion. We'd end up $30 trillion in the red, having borrowed. This is something President Trump said he would turn around. He actually wouldn't be in a deficit when he left office. What changed?
Nothing's changed. What has changed is the Democrats on Capitol Hill have refused to consider the spending reforms that this president has put forward each and every year. So we need Congress to enact these important savings reforms. We're going to continue to propose them. We need things that are necessary for economic growth. We need trade deals to be done and enacted immediately. We need infrastructure to be considered. We need prescription drug legislation to be enacted. So these are all things that we need Congress to go be alongside of us and enact. But the president's going to keep putting forward ideas and proposals to get a handle on our debt and deficits.
Which is important to all of us, I think, obviously. At the same time, this is the president's proposal. This is not what the Democrats are saying. This is the president's proposal. The president's proposal may make the deficit somewhat less than it might have been, but it's still increasing the deficit for the foreseeable future. Isn't that right?
It lowers the deficit each and every year. So we have a $1 trillion deficit this year. It would begin to lower it in fiscal year 21, and it would lower it each and every year until we would hit balance in year 15. We would have a deficit of about 1% of GDP in the 10th year of the budget window.
And Mr. Vought, what assumptions are made about growth in the economy? Because I take it those would be quite important to actually whether we meet those numbers or not. What are you assuming about the growth in the economy in GDP?
Sure, this is a post-policy budget in economic assumptions that assume our policies are enacted and that they would lead to 3% growth. So we continue our past practice of assuming 3% growth. We do reflect a little bit of a dip this year as a result of some of the things that are real-time happening in the economy and the reality that our proposals will take some time to be enacted. But we believe we can get 3% growth. We think it's vital for the country to be able to grow at that level. We also assume that interest rates will track a little bit more with the blue chip forecast compared to previous budgets.
President Trump in his first term got that big tax cut through with the help of the Congress, and that did clearly give some fiscal stimulus to the economy that got us up over or close to 3% for a period of time. What's it going to take this time? We've already got that tax cut in there.
Well, it's important that the increase in business capital will continue as we pass these trade deals, as we restore some of the hiccups we saw this year in the economy. The economy is going great. The unemployment's at 50-year lows, tremendous amount of job growth. All of that will continue. We'll continue on the deregulatory initiatives, getting pipelines and infrastructure projects done within 2 years in terms of their environmental review. So there's a lot of things that we have in the deregulatory agenda that will help us to continue to grow. We need to get some of these policies passed. We need to get trade deals done, and that's why the phase one with China is important. The signing of the USMCA agreement is so crucial. These are other things that we'll be working on to be able to continue to grow the economy at 3% growth.
Mr. Vought, as I understand, the budget proposal will increase the military spending. It's something the president was very proud about. At the same time, it will really cut discretionary spending, including for things like Medicaid, for some health programs and things like that. Is that a change in the president's position? Because in the past, he's indicated he's not going to cut things like that.
I want to be very clear. This budget does not cut Medicaid. It grows Medicare on average 3%. There are reforms within Medicaid to have block grant or per capita spending amount for the states. Similarly, there's a work requirement for Medicaid, for the TANF program, for housing, for food stamps. These are good government reforms that don't require any kind of cuts, but get people out of dependency back into the workforce to allow them to grow and to be part of this economic boom. That's not a cut to Medicaid. Medicaid will grow every year in this budget.
And Mr. Vogt, there's also money, as I understand in the proposal, for that wall along the southern border, about, I think, $2 billion, something like that, in the next year. Originally, President Trump said that the Mexicans would be paying for that. Are we sending them an invoice?
Look, this budget continues to fund the wall with regard to continue to provide the miles necessary along the southern border. We've had tremendous amount of success in getting the resources needed to be up to about 1,000 miles along the southern border. In terms of our relationship with Mexico, they're doing a great amount of work to help us contain our immigration problem along the southern border, putting their National Guard to use, helping us with detaining people that are waiting on some of their immigration court trials. So look, this is an important budget, huge increases for ICE and CBP in this budget. This is a security-first budget as well.
Is there a larger, more philosophical, if I can use that word, change in this budget, where, as I say, we're increasing military spending, we're really substantially cutting, as I understand it, discretionary spending. Historically, what's happened on Capitol Hill is you said we have to have those in lockstep. Is the president saying we're going to delink those now?
We are saying that, and we have said that from the last 3 budgets as well. We cannot afford to continue to increase defense spending and non-defense spending at the same time. And that's why we propose to allow defense to continue to grow. We've got a big increase for nuclear modernization of 20% within the defense top line. And at the same time, we have a 5% reduction for non-defense spending. That would include cutting foreign aid by 21%. But over the course of 10 years, we have to begin to be able to identify waste and inefficiencies in the non-defense area and be able to make priorities and choices. That's what budgeting is about, and that's what this budget does.
Okay, Mr. Vogt, thank you so very much for your time. Very busy day for you. That is Russ Vogt. He's the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, coming to us from the White House. President Trump spoke just minutes ago at the White House while he was meeting with the nation's governors. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Frankly, and now we have car plants being built all over the United States, and we have expansions, a lot of expansions of existing plants. So it's been really an incredible thing. We're doing incredible work. And we're the #1 country in the world right now in terms of the economy. When I was running, and long before I was running, I'd always heard that China, a great respect for President Xi and great respect for China, frankly, but that China was going to be the #1 economy in the world during 2019. Actually, it was 2018, 2019. You all heard it, that we were going to go to #2. And I will tell you, we had our battle. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs and other things. And you saw it was just announced the trade deficit was the lowest it's been in years with China. Just happened 2 days ago. They just announced. But we are now so far ahead of China in terms of the size of our economy that if somebody is smart that's at this position for times into the future, hopefully after 5 years, I won't joke by saying 9, 13, 15. It drives them crazy. For the governors, it drives them. Even when I joke, it drives them crazy. I won't say that. But if somebody smart is in this position, it'll never happen where China overtakes us. It'll never happen. So we right now we're so far ahead of them, they're not catching us for a long time. If the wrong person stands here or sits in the White House, that beautiful chair in the White House, in the Oval Office, sure, they're gonna catch. You have 1.5 billion people. We have 350 million people. But we have a very special place in a very special country, and nobody's going to catch us if we have great leadership. And you have been great leaders for your states, and we appreciate very much that you're at the White House. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do is, I thought maybe we could take a few questions. If you want, we could leave the press there. The press would love that, I'm sure. Or we could have them leave, and we could talk in a different fashion. You won't have to showboat. So would anybody prefer? We'll leave them here for a little while, and then we'll go a different route, perhaps. Any questions, please? Please.
Mr. President, where do you feel like your infrastructure? You got a budget coming out, I think, today. Where are you going to be on infrastructure?
We're doing a big infrastructure potential deal. We need help we need the votes of Democrats. They've been so focused on something else and wasting a lot of people's time, although my poll numbers have been driven way the hell up, so that's one way to do it, I guess. But they have been so focused on the impeachment hoax that they haven't had time to do anything else. But we're ready to go with a big infrastructure bill if they're ready to approve it. We're also ready to lower drug prices very substantially. Last year was the first time in 51 years that prescription drug prices went down. First time in 51 years. But to get them really down, we have to do exactly what we're doing. We need the votes of the Democrats, and they just didn't have the time to do anything, so maybe they will now have the time. But we're all ready to go on infrastructure, on reducing drug prices, very substantial. We can reduce drug prices unbelievably easily and substantially, but we have to get Democrat votes. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Please.
Mr. President, you've had a lot of success with trade, USMCA, China, Japan. What's next on your agenda for trade?
So Europe has been treating us very badly. The European Union was really formed so they could treat us badly, so they've done their job. That was one of the primary reasons. But they treat us badly there. They treat us badly, frankly, on NATO. But NATO, I've gotten, as you know, $130 billion more they will pay, because NATO was going down like a rocket ship. Our past leaders would go over, make a speech, and leave. I went over, made a speech, and said, you got to pay more. Because the United States was paying everything. Essentially, they were paying close to 100%. And I let them know, we have no choice. And they are paying more. They paid $130 billion. I think my biggest fan in the whole world is Secretary General Stoltenberg, head of NATO. They said he can't believe it, because for 20 years it went down. It's like a roller coaster down. None of this, just down. They paid less and less and less. And it got more expensive and more expensive with time. But I raised $130 billion my first meeting. And I raised $400 billion the second meeting. So now it's in good shape. But, we were taken advantage of by a lot of countries, a lot of allies, frankly. Sometimes allies do a better job on you than the enemy, because the enemies you watch out for, right? So, Pete, I think that the next thing could be Europe, where we talk to them very seriously. And they have to do it, because there's been over the last 10, 12 years, there's been a tremendous deficit with Europe. They have barriers that are incredible. I didn't want to do them while we were doing China, Japan, South Korea. I didn't want to do the whole world at one time. Does that make sense? People have learned that doesn't work out too well, even on trade. So we're going to be starting that. They know that. They're ready for it. We made a good deal with Japan. We're going to do a bigger, much more comprehensive deal, but we're taking in $40 billion from Japan, which they didn't expect, nobody expected. We've done great on the trade. It's going to have a tremendous impact. Now, the virus that we're talking about having to do, a lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat, as the heat comes in. Typically, that will go away in April. We're in great shape, though. We have 11 cases, and many of them are in good shape now. But a very good question. Yes, please, Colorado.
Yeah, you mentioned reporting the criminal aliens. What about also, what are your ideas for fixing it for the dreamers and the folks who are here that are hardworking and, it's really tough out there and they work on our farms and the kids who grew up here, and how do we do that? And at the same time, you're also kind of enforcing the other side for those who violate our laws.
Well, we almost had a deal on that with the Democrats, as you know. It was done. And then we lost a decision, and the Democrats said, Trump? Who's that? Trump? Who's that? But we were very close to having a deal in the Dreamers with the House and with the Senate. Would have been a very good deal for everybody. So we're looking at that. But now we're before the Supreme Court. I think we're going to win. because if we don't win, that gives the President of the United States unbelievable powers. You know, President Obama signed that bill. It was an executive order. And when he signed it, he said, I don't have the right to do this, but I'm going to do it anywhere. And he was upheld by a judge. And anyway, it'll be before the Supreme Court pretty soon. And at some point, I think we'll probably make a deal on that. I do feel that way. Okay? Good question. Question? Yes, please, Gary. How's Mitt Romney?
I haven't talked with
You keep him. We don't want him. Go ahead.
States are used to...
Doing a great job in Utah, by the way. Go ahead, Gary.
States are used to balancing the budget, so I think by and large we don't spend more than we take in. And I know you unveiled your budget today, and I know there's a concern for you is the growing debt.
Yeah.
I know we've had nonpartisan economists talk to us as governors saying this is going to come back to bite us in the future if we don't do something about it.
Yeah, I agree.
What are we doing? How can we get to a more balanced budget? Certainly reduce the debt as opposed to continue to grow the debt.
So we're putting out a plan today that over a period of not that long a period of time brings our budget and our deficit down to what it should be, which is close to zero. And I think people are going to be very impressed by it. We're not touching Medicare. We want to keep Medicare. We're not touching Social Security. We're making our country stronger again. We're not decreasing Medicaid. But we're doing a lot of things that are very good, including waste and fraud, tremendous waste and tremendous fraud. So we're doing that in terms of certain programs. And we're taking good care of our military. We're increasing spending on our nuclear program because we have no choice because of what China is doing, what Russia is doing in particular. And so we have a very big number in for that. Now, at the same time, Russia and China both want to negotiate with us to stop this craziness of spending billions and billions of dollars on nuclear weapons. But the only way, until we have that agreement, the only thing I can do is create by far the strongest nuclear force anywhere in the world, which, as you know, over the last 3 years, we've very much upgraded our nuclear, but we're buying new. We have the super-fast missiles, tremendous number of the super-fast. We call them super-fast, where they're 4, 5, 6, and even 7 times faster than an ordinary missile. We need that because, again, Russia has some. I won't tell you how they got it. They got it supposedly from plans from the Obama administration when we weren't doing it, and that's too bad. That's not good. But that's how it happened. And China, as you know, is doing it. So we have a tremendous $740 billion for military. But again, it's also jobs in the United States. So it's everything's made in the United States proudly. And we have the best in the world. We have the best equipment in the world, the best missiles, planes, rockets. Everybody wants our equipment. We have to be very selective, obviously. But we're going to have a very good budget with a very powerful military budget because we have no choice. Okay, about that. Ron, you have something about, for instance, your plan of buying and cutting prescription drugs? You want to tell them what we're doing?
Well, so we had a panel about your administration's approval under an old 2003 law that prior administrations did not utilize to allow safe and affordable drugs to be imported from Canada. So that's going through the regulatory process. We in Florida are working our own parallel track. As soon as your rules are done and in place, we're looking to buy, and we can save a lot of money just for things like our prison system because the drugs are a lot cheaper. So we think there'll be good savings here, but I think it opens up a larger conversation, which I know you want to have, about why are we funding the drugs for everyone in the world? Americans want relief, and I know you fought hard for that. But thanks for approving the Florida program.
You can go, and Colorado's doing that also. You can go to certain countries, and the exact same pill made in the exact same plant, factory, wherever it may be, from one of the big companies, will sell for 50, 60, 70% less than the United States is paying because it's broken. It's a broken system. And so one of the things I've authorized is that certain states have requested, probably after this, everybody in this room will go back, but if we buy from Canada, you'll save 50% at this moment. Now, that may go up or everything may come down. One thing is going to happen or another. Either the drug companies are going to raise it and not make it possible to buy. They're going to raise it in Canada, meaning so you won't be able to do it. Or everyone's going to go down. Because you have a middleman in the middle that are making a fortune. Nobody knows who these people are, but they're getting rich because we had a broken system, and it's about time it gets fixed. So a lot of shakeup is going to take place. But if we had Democrats helping us, we could solve this problem in one day. But they don't want to vote. Again, they don't have any time to vote. They don't have any time to do anything other than what they do. So they seem to be freed up a lot now. They're freed up a lot, actually, I hear. How about a couple of more, and then we'll let the press go and relax and take it easy. Please, Governor.
Your administration has done a great job with regard to addressing the opioid crisis.
Thank you.
An aspect about that is the growing problem of fentanyl, especially fentanyl coming across the southern border.
Right.
And it's my understanding there's some information about a lot of that coming from China.
Yes.
What I'm curious about is what the status is with regard to the reduction of fentanyl coming from China and our ability to corral that and to reduce that.
So as you know, it's gone down. I met with President Xi on the trade deal, and I said, you have to stop fentanyl coming into our country. You have to do me a favor and stop it. You have to get it stopped. It has to end.
We've been listening to President Trump speaking at the White House to the governors, actually on a wide range of subjects, everything from Europe to NATO to the economy to opioids. He's going around the block, including on trade. He also said that Europe may be the next front for a trade deal. Let's get a check now on how the markets are reacting to all this, if they are. Kaylee Lyons is with us in New York. Kaylee?
Well, David, we're pretty much where we were when the president started speaking. What we're looking at in the equity market is largely shrugging off concerns surrounding the coronavirus. You have the S&P 500 higher by about 0.3% after its best week since June last week. And it's really a continued story of tech leadership. The tech-heavy NASDAQ is higher by more than 0.5% today. But when we look at other asset classes, it's a bit of a more mixed picture on risk. You're still seeing buying into safer haven assets like U.S. Treasuries, specifically on the long end of the curve with the 10-year yield lower by about 3 basis points. And the commodity complex is still really under pressure with WTI back below $50 a barrel, down about 1% today. And no surprise with that move lower in oil, energy is the biggest laggard on a sector basis within the S&P 500. The energy sector down by about 1.25% today. And some of the worst performers within the index are energy companies, the likes of E&Ps like Occidental Petroleum, as well as Contra Resources, as well as the big integrated companies like Exxon, which is lower by about 2.75%. So the energy pain continued. This is not just the worst performer on a sector basis today, but so far in 2020 and in the last 12 months, David.
I lost. Okay, many thanks to Kaylee Lyons for the latest ahead on the reason we're in New Hampshire, actually from Manchester, New Hampshire. We welcome now our chief Washington correspondent, Kevin Cirilli, who is on the scene at a Bernie Sanders rally. He's in Ringe, New Hampshire. Kevin, give us an update.
Well, right behind me, one of the Senator Sanders' top surrogates, State Senator Nina Turner, is rallying up the crowd. In just a few short minutes, Senator Sanders anticipated to take the stage. I'm told he's going to continue with this pitch, David, of what he's describing as economic inclusivity. They're pushing back against the criticism that his self-described label of a democratic socialist would not be something that would be able to help him in a general election. Jeff Weaver, the senator's senior advisor, telling me they're fully prepared to call the president a corporate socialist. Beyond that, David, they're also trying to seize upon momentum. A trio of polls that have come out within the past day show Senator Sanders leading the field, but with former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg in a close second. Beyond that, Senator Amy Klobuchar trying to battle ahead of Senator Elizabeth Warren and former Vice President Joe Biden. Regardless of who wins tomorrow night, there will be pressure on some of these candidates to drop out of the race.
Okay, thanks so much. Our chief Washington correspondent, Kevin Cirilli, who's all over the state covering this New Hampshire primary. Now let's come back here to Manchester, New Hampshire, because that's the reason we're here is because of this primary coming up, even though the president seems to be soaking up a lot of oxygen. Here to guide us each step of the way are Bloomberg political contributors. That is Rick Davis of Stone Court Capital. Rick has done several political campaigns over the years. I must say he's won every single time here in New Hampshire, including when he was running John McCain's campaign for president back in 2008. And also, we have Jeannie Zaino with us. She's political science professor at Iona College and senior advisor to applied economics. So, Rick, I really want to talk about the tale of two video boxes on your TV set right now. These Democrats are trying to get things going here and get some enthusiasm, but the president won't let them.
Yeah. Donald Trump is very good at getting into the news cycle, right? And so not only did he just stage the little presser that he did and talk about the budget that he released today, but he's going to be in Manchester, New Hampshire tonight at a big rally right in the center of all the activity that the Democrats are doing during their primary.
So Jimmy, actually, it's just sort of across the street virtually from where we are right here. And there are lots of people gathering already. Some people have been there all night long. But it really raises the question, can any of the Democratic candidates generate that kind of enthusiasm? Because we didn't see it in Iowa necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, in Iowa, the president had a rally. 7,000 people attended right before the caucus. And we were talking about the fact, of course, Democrats are dispersed. There's a lot of them running, but they weren't generating nearly as big crowds. And to your point, it's raining here in Manchester, and there are people camped out there all night to see the president. It's quite a scene out there. And to Rick's point, he really is the master at getting free or earned media. So I think his goal is exactly what you said, to really knock the Democrats off of the local national news as we get into tomorrow's all-important primary for the Democrats.
Rick, and just the passion question. Is Bernie Sanders the only one out there right now who's generating anything approaching that kind of passion?
Well, I think that you got to put it in context. I mean, Donald Trump will have 10,000 people at this event tonight, and a big event here is a couple thousand. So for the Democrats, so we saw a relatively flat turnout in Iowa. So there was no talk coming out of Iowa about anybody's passion. Even Bernie Sanders got beat by somebody else, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who nobody expected to have happen in Iowa. I guess we can actually say that now that the results are in. But I think that's the biggest question in this New Hampshire primary right now is, are the primary contenders now going to turn out? Are we going to get a big turnout for the primary?
Yeah, maybe the biggest story coming out of New Hampshire. We'll see. Jeannie Davis and Rick Davis are going to be with us right through the entire process, along with Taylor Caswell. He is actually the commissioner for New Hampshire Business and Economics Council. He's going to be coming to us to talk to us about what the state of the economy here is in New Hampshire. Maybe one of the big issues coming up in that primary coming up tomorrow. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are edging higher. The Dow is up 43 points, S&P up 9, the Nasdaq climbing 52 points. The parent company of Popeyes is trading higher after quarterly earnings topped analyst estimates. Restaurant Brands said same-store sales rose 34%, boosted by Popeyes' popular chicken sandwich. Two big mall operators are getting together as they battle the retail slump. Simon Property is buying Taubman Centers in a $3.6 billion deal. And it's the season of love, but for many people, Valentine's Day will come with a hefty price tag. 70% of Americans plan to spend money on their partner this Valentine's Day, with the average amount being $152. But for millennials, the Bankrate.com survey finds the number jumps to $208, topping both Gen Xers and baby boomers. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me. I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Revisions, return policies. There are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From Manchester, New Hampshire, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for Bloomberg First Word News. For that, we go to Mark Crumpton in New York. Mark?
David, polls show Bernie Sanders has the lead a day before the Democratic presidential primary in New Hampshire. South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg is second, and Senator Amy Klobuchar is third. But two tracking polls show that about a third of the voters could still change their minds. In Ireland, the election has upended the nation's traditional two-party power structure. The former political wing of the IRA, Sinn Féin, will feature in coalition talks after Saturday's election. It's on track for second place in the number of seats won. Sinn Féin is now a left-wing nationalist party. The two major parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, have kept the party out of the government in the past. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson plans to increase spending on infrastructure. He's following through on campaign pledges he made before December's election. The spending will focus on northern England. Prime Minister Johnson's plan includes money for 5G wireless networks in rural areas. He also plans to spend more on mass transit. An historic night at the Oscars, South Korean comedy Parasite became the first foreign language movie to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Parasite also won for Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Top International Picture. A number of presenters remarked on the Oscars' diversity problem, or lack of diversity. For the second year in a row, all of the nominees in the four acting categories were white. No female directors were nominated this year. One study found that women make up more than half of the U.S. population, but only 16% of Hollywood writers and 8% of directors. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David, back to you in Manchester.
Thanks so much, Mark. Elections usually come down to the economy, but is that going to be true in New Hampshire this year? To take us through the economic issues here in New Hampshire, we welcome Taylor Caswell. He's Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Rick Davis and Jeannie Zaner are still with us. So, Taylor, first of all, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for welcoming us to New Hampshire. Give us a snapshot of where the New Hampshire economy is right now.
Well, the New Hampshire economy is very strong at the moment. We are seeing great growth in terms of the labor force, which is really key for New Hampshire, is the ability to provide workforce for the employers that are here. We're one of these states in the Northeast that is seeing a little bit of a decline in terms of the traditional demographics, getting older, and that, so on and so forth. We've been really working hard to be able to develop pipelines of people and workforce for the really growth-oriented businesses we're seeing come here.
Fantastic to be back in New Hampshire. The Grand Estaters have always had a pretty high median household income. Is that sustaining itself under the economic expansion?
It is, and in fact, it's growing. Our wage numbers continue to go up a little bit. Our labor force participation numbers keep going up, even though our unemployment rate remains rather static, around 2.4, 2.5%. And it's been that way. We've been under 3% since 2015. So, I mean, 3%, if you assume that's full employment, we're looking at a continued growth in the ability to provide that workforce for our employers here in New Hampshire.
So one of the things the president has talked a lot about is this blue-collar boom that he's talked about. But one of the things we hear about New Hampshire and, quite frankly, other states is that it has been uneven. And so some of New Hampshire's poorest cities are still not feeling that recovery or that boom. Is that something that you feel here? Is that what you're seeing on the ground?
I think it is. It's not necessarily at the scale that we might see in some other states, because we are a small state and we're pretty tight. I mean, to get from Manchester to Littleton or to Berlin isn't all that far. There's been a traditional sort of sense of, the mill towns of the North Country, the old forest mills, paper mills, and that's what is still in the memory of a lot of people. And as we sort of transition into a much more advanced, technologically based economy, that's a transition that is a little harder hard in some parts of our state, but it is we are seeing that same benefit.
If the people of New Hampshire are basically happy with the economy, what national issues might drive them to the polls? I mean, what issues are there? Healthcare, climate, things like that. What motivates them?
Oh, those are two big ones. Climate change and healthcare. Housing is another issue that we have. I mean, really any place where you have a strong economy, you see housing, tightness in the housing market. We're definitely seeing that here. We're at a 0.75% vacancy rate for two-bedroom apartments in the state right now, and that's statewide. That's not just here in the southern part of the state. So it's affecting everything. And when I was talking before about how we really focus on the human aspect of being able to provide that part of the capital equation for our businesses, the housing thing comes to the forefront pretty quickly.
Just picking up on the climate issue, we've seen warmer winters than we've had in the past, and I know winter sports is a major driver of the economy.
February, it's raining.
Yeah. It's February and it's raining. So has that had an impact on the economy from your perspective?
I think that these, primarily where we see that initially is in our ski areas,
right.
And it's been an okay year in terms of skiing. But there's increase in technology. There's the ability to make snow in different levels, but there's also an adaptation that's occurring. So ski areas that traditionally were dark during the summer months are now turning into places with zip lines and mountain biking and hiking, and really sort of using the infrastructure that's there year round in order to generate income and generate value for the community and for those businesses.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on something you said, because we hear an awful lot about this, which is that particularly young people, an aging population, young people moving to other areas, in particular in many cases for more job opportunities. What are you doing in New Hampshire to keep them here? And is the federal government helping you in that endeavor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are keeping them here, but we're also recruiting them here.
Yeah.
And one of the big ways we're doing that is we're using a very traditionally strong tourism, hospitality, resort marketplace and economy to really sort of be that entry drug for people. A lot of people who come here spend a couple of days here experiencing what life is like in New Hampshire, and while they're here, they're going to see that we have a very strong economy. We have great jobs. We have a plethora of jobs, plenty of open jobs, and we're within a real hour or less to Boston. So that's a big part of how we're able to continue to grow, where we're seeing other states like Vermont and Maine kind of going in the opposite direction.
Has that proximity to Boston driven tech here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, right where we're sitting right now is probably about an hour without any traffic. So usually it's a lot more than that, because traffic is pretty tough in the Boston area. But the companies that we're seeing come into southern New Hampshire, a lot of times they're companies that have a base in Boston or Cambridge, but they need to be able to expand, and there's just no room and no affordable room in the Boston metro area. So they're driving up the road a little ways and finding a state that has no income tax, no sales tax, no capital gains tax, and we do very well here in providing that access to workforce and access to a pro-growth economy.
Demographically, how has that worked out? You talked earlier about an aging population and access to opportunity with the low tax base here, and obviously attractions to people on your borders. It's a small state, right? So a little bit, it goes a long way. A little over around 1.4 million people live here. Yep. Has it, over the last 5 years, let's say, has population levels increased or decreased?
Our net migration numbers are very high. Right. I mean, compared to other northeastern states. And in fact, if you look at the net millennial migration by population, New Hampshire's in the top 10 in the country right now. So we're really, I think, making a strong case of combining those things I was talking about: lifestyle assets, access to a strong economy, access to really good jobs. And if you want to do a startup, if you want to start a business in one of our rural communities and live the lifestyle of the White Mountains region or in the Mount Washington Valley, which is a pretty good lifestyle, this is a great place to be able to do that and find the investment, find the workforce, find the supportive communities that you need to make that successful.
Do you have any sense of the level of engagement of the people in New Hampshire with this primary in particular?
Oh, it's probably about as good as I've ever seen it. You know what? One thing that people don't often talk about when they talk about the New Hampshire primary is that it is so much part of our ethos here. We have 400 state representatives. I mean, you and a couple of your best friends get together and you can get yourself a seat in Concord. And I think that really filters right through our entire system, whether you're talking about planning and zoning boards or real engagement. It's part of what we are here, and I think that is a real value to the national process.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I grew up right nearby in Connecticut. We climbed Mount Washington many, many times. It's absolutely gorgeous. What I wanted to ask you is, if you could talk to these candidates, what would you like them to say, particularly the Democrats, as it pertains to the economy that you're not hearing out there?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much stuff going on right now with our economy. We're in a transitional period between, like the rest of the world, really kind of transitioning from the industrial age to a digital age. And we're seeing that in a state that's got a lot of rural character to it. So that's a unique aspect that we're finding a lot of different ways to struggle with. And how do you kind of weave together all of the various pieces of what makes an economy strong into something that reflects the 21st century? That's something that's front of mind for us all the time, and really focusing that on the ability to provide an ecosystem for our businesses in New Hampshire and businesses that aren't here yet to be highly successful. This is a new age and a new practice of economic development, and we're trying to stay ahead of the game here in New Hampshire. We have the tools. I think we'd like to see the federal government help us continue to do that.
Taylor, thanks so much for being here. It's really good to have you.
You bet.
That's Taylor Caswell. He's commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Rick Davis and Jeannie Zaino are going to be staying with us. Coming up, one more day. Democratic candidates are crisscrossing New Hampshire in a final push ahead of tomorrow's primary. But will it be as decisive as contests in the past years? We're going to ask Chris Galdieri of St. Anselm College that question. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace. Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
It's time to search out On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
The Iowa caucuses were an epic fail, a fiasco, and an invitation for suspicion.
No matter what the results are now, they're going to be questioned in terms of their authenticity.
How we got this system in the first place and other tales from primary land on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC studios on TuneIn today.
They can be wrong. They especially have trouble catching late-breaking developments. Yeah. So something like a candidate who has a great debate right before the election, someone who has a big gaffe the day before the election, those sorts of things aren't the sorts of things that show up in polling.
Yeah, I certainly remember in 2000, the real breakout campaign I ran for John McCain here. I mean, no poll had him in the lead consistently. The whole primary was actually a little earlier than it is now, and we came out of the holidays, and all of a sudden we had this great outcome, 19-point win out of nowhere. And talk a little bit about the momentum you think a winner of the New Hampshire primary can get, because certainly for us it changed the dynamic completely in South Carolina, which was 3 weeks later. What do you think will happen this time?
Well, I think it depends on who wins and by how much. If Bernie Sanders wins, which we're all expecting at this point based on the polling, which could be wrong, if he wins by 10 points, I think that's a great benefit to his campaign. Yep. You know, he's been saying for 4 years that his movement is the future of the Democratic Party, but if you look at Iowa, he was stuck in a neck-and-neck race with the former mayor of South Bend. So if he's able to win a convincing victory here, I think that helps him in a way that Iowa didn't. On the other hand, if he's tied with Buttigieg again, I don't think that does him as much good as it would have otherwise. And if somebody like Warren or Klobuchar surges into second or even a very close third, I think that upends our understanding of the race the same way that Iowa did.
So we always hear about New Hampshire. It's not quite a closed primary. It's not an open primary either. So could you just explain what they mean by not closed and not open? Because most of us are one or the other.
It's semi-open or semi-closed. If you belong to a party, you vote in that party's primary. If you don't belong to a party, if you're what is called here an undeclared voter, you can go to the polling place on Tuesday morning and ask for a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot. Now, this year, there's not much of a Republican contest, so those undeclared voters could theoretically vote in the Democratic primary in pretty big numbers.
Have you ever seen a situation where those undeclareds go over to quote unquote the other side and sort of upend? I mean, to David's point about what can change the polls can be that huge number of undeclared that you have.
Well, I think if you look at John McCain in 2000, that was a year where those undeclared voters played a pretty big role in his surprise victory in the primary that year. I think this year you're seeing a lot of the more moderate candidates in the Democratic field, particularly Mayor Pete, Amy Klobuchar, are trying to get those independent-minded, undeclared voters to vote in the Democratic primary, thinking that they'll find them a better alternative than someone like Bernie Sanders.
It's interesting when you mentioned the more moderates. You didn't mention Vice President Biden. Was that on purpose?
No, I just had, there's only so much time.
Because one of the questions right now is what happens with Vice President Biden here, who had been the front runner preemptively, for most of the race so far, and now all of a sudden he's struggling.
Yeah, well, I mean, he has had a really tough time in Iowa. He placed, I think, 4th or 5th place in a state that he had hoped to do much better than that in. I think he's tried to do a bit of a reset with his campaign. He was off the campaign trail doing debate prep and trying to figure out a new message for his campaign. I think he had a pretty good night on Friday at the debate at St. Anselm. I think the question is if that's enough. I think now that there are other candidates competing for that moderate lane of support, now that you have, this new phenomenon in the form of Mayor Pete, now that you have Elizabeth Warren trying to stake a claim on the race, it's really tough for Biden going forward, I think.
These independents, they really are decisive sometimes when they move en masse. And in 2000, as you mentioned, we saw the move from Bill Bradley over to John McCain. And the driver there was campaign finance reform, right? I mean, John McCain showed up with a better plan and a more commitment. Is there any particular issue that you're seeing within the independents particularly that might drive them toward a certain candidate?
I don't know that there is one in particular this year. I think it's more a question of you have these independent, undeclared voters. Many of them are not Trump supporters. They're the folks who would have voted for, a John McCain in past primaries, that sort of thing. But they're not ready to get on board with a Bernie Sanders. They're not necessarily even going to support an Elizabeth Warren. So I think for them, trying to boost one of the more centrist, mainstream options in the Democratic primary is pretty appealing to them. But I don't know that any one of those has a particular claim to those voters.
One thing we didn't talk a lot about out of Iowa was the number of young people who voted. And of course, the millennial generation is the biggest voting bloc now in American history. Are you seeing that? I mean, your students are now Generation Z, I guess, but are you seeing that with the young people here in New Hampshire, at least on the Democratic side, but even the Republican, that they are going to be turning out in larger numbers than they usually do?
I don't know. I mean, getting young people to vote is just about the hardest thing that a campaign can try to do. If you have a first-time voter, they've never registered before, they might not be sure where to vote. New Hampshire's voting laws at the moment are a bit confusing for an 18 to 21-year-old who's never cast a ballot before. But I think that, as you said, they do have large numbers. I think even a small increase could really benefit the candidate that they favor, which in this case is probably Sanders.
So let me put you on the spot. As you said, sometimes the polls have been wrong because of some late-breaking news. Can be a debate, can be an appearance, something else. Actually, I think the Hillary Clinton crying in that diner in 2008 was an important thing. Looking at it right now, today, do you see any developments like that might move it one way or the other for one or more of these candidates?
Well, one thing that happened over the weekend was a late-breaking negative attack from the Biden campaign on Pete Buttigieg. And on the one hand, when you're behind, you go after the person who's ahead of you. But I think that particular attack just might not be a good fit with the image people have of Joe Biden, and I'm not sure that's going to help him in the way he was hoping.
So you think that could react negatively to Biden?
I think there could be a boomerang, sort of a backlash effect from that.
But do you agree with that, Rick? Because, to put you on the spot, you sort of believe politics is a contact sport. You got to go after people.
Yeah, look, negative advertising works, right? The reason people use it, especially if they're in a jam like Biden is to try and dig out of that hole. The reality is this campaign to date has been pretty much void of any negativity. So not only is it a pretty negative ad, but it's also one of the very first ones. And so people in New Hampshire, they are pretty sophisticated. As you know, it's a very activist population. And so they will probably take a look at this and decide for themselves whether or not they think Biden has overstepped with this ad. We have had instances in New Hampshire where ads have reacted negatively to the campaign and put them up. So it could be along that line. I think there's so little information about Mayor Pete Buttigieg out there that they may see this as informative, right? And the contrast on vice president versus mayor is a legitimate contrast. So I would say right now for Biden, this is probably the only option he has left.
What are you predicting in terms of your neighboring Senator Elizabeth Warren? We're hearing an awful lot about, obviously, Bernie Sanders, but she's got a lot at stake here, and she's well known. How do New Hampshire voters feel about Elizabeth Warren and her prospects?
Yeah, and she spent a lot of time in the state, not just as a presidential candidate, but working for Jeanne Shaheen in 2014, campaigning for Maggie Hassan and Hillary Clinton in 2016. She's built a large organization here. She has a lot of people on staff, a lot of volunteers. Her rallies this week have apparently been very large, very energetic. So she might be poised for a surprisingly strong finish compared to what we saw in Iowa.
Chris, thanks so much for being with us, Chris. Really great to have you here. He's Professor Chris Gallieri of St. Anselm College. Rick Davis and Jeannie Zaino will be sticking with us, and we're going to have live coverage of the New Hampshire primary results. That's starting tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information sooner?
What does this tell us about the state of deal making?
Let's fix that.
One unprofitable company plus another doesn't make a profitable company.
Carol Mazur.
Talk to us about real-world applications.
Jason Kelly.
Remind us what the potential is for everyday folk.
Bloomberg Business Week.
Vice President of Exploratory Science is one of the cooler titles.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba, please be done. Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. Watzel Shaw is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water? NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm David Weston reporting from Manchester, New Hampshire today. It's time now for our stock of the hour. Amazon is trading at a new record high. The stock is up about 2% today. This comes as the company seeks to challenge President Trump in a lawsuit challenging the loss of a Pentagon cloud contract. A big one, I must say. Kaylee Lyons joins us with more from New York. Kaylee?
Yeah, David, this is a big one. This is the Jedi cloud contract from the Pentagon. It's worth about $10 billion over 10 years. And this is really a saga that has gone on for quite some time. At the end of the thing, Amazon and Microsoft were really the ones jockeying to win this contract. It was ultimately awarded to Microsoft back in October, and then in November, Amazon filed suit, essentially alleging that the Department of Justice didn't really fairly judge its bid for the contract because of Trump's views of Jeff Bezos, Amazon CEO, that he views him as his political enemy. Of course, Trump has long been critical of Jeff Bezos as the owner of the Washington Post and everything from shipping rates to Amazon. There's been a lot of contention between the president and Jeff Bezos. So Amazon says that is what is at play here. Now, as part of this lawsuit, the court filings today show that Amazon is seeking to depose the president as well as former Defense Secretary Mattis, current Defense Secretary Esper, as well as the Pentagon's Chief Information Officer Dana Deasy. That is the news today, David.
Yeah, exactly. President Trump is directly implicated by Jim Mattis's former speechwriter who wrote a book who said basically the president told Jim Mattis, make sure that this thing does not go to Amazon. At the same time, is this really a realistic appraisal of the chances of this challenge being overturned?
Well, that's a very fair point. Of course, Amazon would like that given the lucrative scale of this contract. But when you look at how this business of Amazon Web Services is actually performing, it's still doing pretty well. They were a very early mover in this space, and they are the dominant player. They have about a 40% market share. Of course, their largest direct competitor, though, is Microsoft. So they really are trying to edge them out as this is becoming a more and more competitive business, though. What that means in the longer term in regard to its ability to depose the president and or win this lawsuit is kind of an open question. But you can see why this is important to Amazon, given that AWS is a higher margin business and is now responsible for the vast majority of its operating income.
Exactly. It's been so terribly successful in that cloud business. Okay, many thanks now to Bloomberg's Kayla Lyons reporting from New York on Amazon. Coming up, Balance of Power continues on Bloomberg Television and Radio live from Manchester. And tomorrow night, please catch our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary. We're going to be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to find out whether actually Bernie Sanders can follow through on the promise that he can win here, or whether there may be yet another surprise coming to us from New Hampshire. Live from Manchester, New Hampshire, this is David Weston. This is Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. A $28 million Warhol, a $35 million Basquiat, a $70 million Twombly. Hedge fund manager Daniel Sondheim has acquired all these works and more while wielding one of the most powerful tools in finance, leverage. Time was, art aficionados rarely talked openly about borrowing money against their paintings to build collections, make investments, or just pay the bills. But Sondheim is part of a new breed of collectors, eagerly pledging artworks in exchange for lines of credit, and in the process, leveraging the $67 billion art market as never before. Someone who can invest all on his own, Jeff Bezos, world's richest person, may not be known as a contemporary art buyer, but there's growing excitement that a chunk of his $12